Chapter 362. When Su Xinxing rolled up his sleeves, intending to end this chapter in 3 lines, Qin Xingyan and Emily finally arrived at the Earth Shrine. "Senior, please wait a moment." Seeing that Su Xinxing looked like he was going to release a torture CG at any moment, the cultivator girl hurriedly stopped him. "What's wrong?" "There's something wrong with Jiang Jin's spirit veins," the girl hurriedly replied. The first to notice the abnormality was Xiao Jingyi's police car that had turned into a monster, but no one paid much attention to it at the time. Now that they thought about it, it was very likely that the police car monster itself was a monster born of spirit energy, so it was very sensitive to the spirit energy in the earth vein. However, when they approached the Earth Shrine, even Qin Xingyan, who didn't have a very high level of cultivation, could feel the strange flow of spirit energy. It was obvious that the problem with the spirit veins was imminent. "Oh, if that's the case, the culprit is that girl in front of us." Su Xinxing pointed at the coquettish girl who had a chance to catch her breath. Qin Xingyan didn't say much and just stared at the girl with a serious expression. It seems like there's still someone who knows what's good for them," the girl smiled strangely. "Sure enough, you've injected all the spirit energy in the earth vein into your body." Qin Xingyan gritted his teeth as if he had understood something. Seeing that the 2 girls were communicating in riddles, Su Xinxing frowned slightly and looked at Emily. The little girl who shared the same heart as him thought for a moment, then made an explosion gesture with her hands and said in the same tone as a certain white robot, "Bang balalala, it'll explode?" "What does that mean?" Su Xinxing was even more confused. "Her body contains a lot of spirit energy. If she dies in this state, the spirit energy will explode from her body," Qin Xingyan hurriedly explained. "Does that mean it will blow up the entire Jiangjin city?" Su Xinxing sneered. "Then there's no problem. I'll throw her into a different space and kill her." Not only that, but the Earth God's whereabouts are also unknown. Because Qin Xingyan had not noticed the statue on the other side of the room, he only treated the Earth lowly as a missing person. If the person who stabilizes the flow is also dead, then the spiritual energy in Jiang Jin's veins will gush out in one go. When that happens, the density of spiritual energy in Jiang Jin will be unbelievably high. It's true that a certain amount of spiritual energy is beneficial to human beings, but just like oxygen, once there's too much of it, the benefits will turn into disadvantages. Under standard atmospheric pressure, if human beings stay in pure oxygen for 24 hours, they will contract pneumonia, which will eventually lead to respiratory failure and suffocation. In the same way, when humans are exposed to a high density of spirit energy for a short period of time, their bodies will mutate due to the corrosion of spirit energy, and the result of this mutation will often lead to errors in the human physiology. Some organs will not be able to work and in the end they will die. But the most frightening thing is that this is just the beginning. The high-density spiritual energy is only temporary. Soon the spiritual energy will dissipate, and the people who have adapted to the environment and survived will die in this situation. Jiangjin and the surrounding land will completely become a dead land where plants cannot grow and living creatures cannot survive because of the loss of the spirit veins. This city will also become a forgotten wave in human history, just like the ancient city of Pompeii that was buried by a volcanic eruption or the surrounding area that was destroyed by the carbon dioxide explosion of Lake Nyos, one of the 3 deadly lakes in Africa, recognized as the world's deadliest lake by the Guinness World Records in 2008. So that was the reason why that guy had been so fearless all this time. Su Xinxing thought to himself. He slowly lowered his head, and his face was also covered by the shadow of this action, so others could not see his expression. "Do you finally understand now?" "Yes, only I can attack you at will, but you won't be able to fight back because of fear of harming the innocent." At the same time, the body of the former Earth God finally began to mutate. On her back, black keratinized organs that looked like spider feet grew. The way they opened and closed was extremely disgusting. While shouting at Su Xinxing, she rushed toward him. The next moment, the monster's upper body and head exploded with a bang and green viscous body fluid splashed around. The body that looked like a headless corpse also fell to the ground weakly. After a while, twisted granulation started to grow crazily from the wound on that half of the body. Among the granulation, there was a twisted face with a twisted expression on its face. "Why?" Its voice was sharp and harsh, no longer like a normal human or even a creature, but even so, it could not hide the horror and fear in it. "Why can you still attack me without hesitation? Could it be that you know that this level of injury is still within the range of my rebirth? Who knows that kind of thing? Su Shenxing, who had blocked all the disgusting bodily fluids with his cloud scales, slowly raised his head. However, unlike before, his gaze seemed to have lost interest in everything. It was a gaze that was purely fixated on death. The air seemed to have frozen because of this. Spiritual energy can cause harm to humans? Then blast away all the spiritual energy that leaked out. Will Jiangjin become a land of death without a spiritual vein? If that was the case, he would punch out a new spirit vein. There will be a way for that kind of thing in the future. But before that, I want to kill you, and this time it won't change for any reason. Su Shenxing said calmly with a cold tone. You want to make things difficult for me with this kind of multiple-choice question? How much do you look down on me? He was not joking, nor was he bluffing. The man in front of him really ignored all the possible consequences and wanted to kill him. Hurry up and move. Even if he couldn't escape, he had to at least put up a final struggle. Even though he knew that he couldn't continue to stay motionless like this, no matter how he urged him, his body didn't move at all. It wasn't because he was bound by a spell or petrified, but simply because he was facing an existence that was far superior to him in terms of life level, which caused his body to be unable to move. It was like a weak herbivore facing a predator such as a hungry wolf might have the intention to escape or fight back. But when a giant dragon descended from the sky, the natural suppression of the food chain would cause them to be unable to move at all. In this world, people called it the dragon's might, but in the end, it was just a suppression of life level. Seeing the opponent's appearance, Su Shenxing wasn't surprised at all. In fact, the opponent's performance was already considered good. In the past, when facing him seriously, some of his enemies were literally scared to the point of shitting their pants. At this moment, something fell from the sky, accurately speaking from the ceiling. Su Shenxing turned his head and found that the person who came was actually Xiao Jingyi, who was guarding the police car. Oh, my feet are numb. Xiao Jingyi, who had jumped down from a height of tens of meters, had a sour expression on his face. Master, I think you need to train more, the Yuanrong sword spirit suggested seriously. In fact, if it wasn't for her protecting Xiao Jingyi, just that one hit would have turned Xiao Jingyi into a pile of mosaics. What's wrong? Su Shenxing frowned and asked. However, it would have been better if he hadn't said anything. As soon as he spoke, Xiao Jingyi and the former earth goddess on his back froze. Even the Yuanrong sword spirit directly disappeared. Oh, I forgot that I'm still in serious mode. Su Shenxing took a deep breath and let his state of mind return to normal. Only then did the air in the temple seem to circulate again. That scared me to death. I almost peed my pants. Xiao Jingyi immediately sat on the ground without caring about his image, gasping for air. The monster targeted by Su Shenxing's aura directly collapsed on the ground. Its body was soft as if it had no bones and could only desperately gasp for air. Other than Mo Li, only Qin Xingyan, who was protected by Mo Li, was relatively normal. He only felt a little pressure. This girl just woke up and said that she has something to say to you. After Xiao Jingyi recovered a little, he immediately threw the blame to the little girl on his back. Therefore, Su Shenxing's gaze also shifted to the latter. Let me make it clear in advance. If you're pleading for your lower body, then you don't have to say anything. No, I just hope that you can wait for a little while. The little girl shook her head. When I fainted, I vaguely understood how the balance between me and her was maintained. Once upon a time, we were one, but the power of the Institute of Divine Punishment gradually corroded my heart with hatred. At the same time, I also deeply loved Jiangjin's land and humans. When these two feelings were at odds with each other, we were born. At first I thought that the flow of power and memory was determined by the strength of our bodies or minds, but later on when I thought about it carefully I realized that something was wrong. If that was really the case, then I, who had almost no memory and was extremely weak at the beginning, should have been swallowed by her in an instant. After that, I understood that the weight between the two of us was only based on one standard, and that was the strength of feelings, or determination. She wanted to take revenge on Jiangjin, on humans, and her feelings of revenge surpassed my feelings of love for humans. My power and memory would be taken away, and on the other hand I would be able to take away her power and memory. Previously, when Miss Fei Gong invited me to eat, I subconsciously had a good impression of humans, so I took back part of my power and memory. Su Shenxing gradually became impatient. But what does this have to do with the current situation? I want to atone for my sins. I won't beg you to forgive her, but our sins must be repaid. The mess she left behind, I have to solve it. The little girl said firmly. The current situation of this land is very bad. If we let it continue like this, it will take at least 100 years to repair. But there is a way to improve this situation. What way? Sacrifice a human to this land. Earth God Loli did mention this before. If it wasn't for Su Shenxing getting the living soil from the moon, Jiang Jin's situation would have worsened. But they didn't expect that in the end they still had to do this step. While the others were in a daze, the little girl pulled out a gemstone dagger from the floor. Then she held the dagger, knelt there and closed her eyes. But the current me can't be used as a human sacrifice, so it will take some time. As she spoke, her body began to gradually grow, and the clothes that Mizuki Takemiya bought for her burst out. Her originally young and inexperienced curves also became plump and full. Because the monster was on the verge of death, it naturally didn't have the heart to continue hating the humans and land of Jiangjin. That was why the girl was able to retrieve the remaining memories and power of the monster so easily. It was just that this change made Xiao Jingyi not know where to put his eyes for a moment. On the other hand, Su Shenxing's face was still half opened like a dead fish's eyes. As the little girl grew up, the monster's body gradually withered. In the end, the human part of the monster disappeared, leaving only the pure monster part. After losing the restraint of the foreign body, it struggled to stand up with the tenacious vitality of the monster. It wanted to escape from the Earth Temple, but it was directly smashed into pieces by Su Shenxing. Suddenly, Jiang Jin's spirit vein began to go berserk. Countless spiritual energy poured into the center of the spirit vein, the Earth Temple. If this was allowed to continue, it would soon be washed away by the spiritual energy. And the former Earth God little girl, or rather the little girl opened her eyes and slowly stood up. She didn't feel ashamed or anything because she was naked. She just walked lightly to the statue of Earth God Loli, gently stroked the roots outside and said softly, "You've done very well. Leave the rest to me." As if these words had an effect, the roots retracted back into the ceiling. Then the little girl bit her finger and smeared her blood on the statue of Earth God Loli. After doing all this, the little girl turned around, looked at Su Shenxing and said in a clear voice, "Although I'm sorry, but can you please thank Miss Fei Gong on my behalf?" Su Shenxing hesitated for a moment, then nodded. If that was the only request. The little girl showed a relieved expression, raised the gemstone dagger and stabbed it into her chest. Chapter 363. Chiketsu woke up from her sleep. "It's so hot," the girl mumbled unconsciously as she opened her sleepy eyes. Vaguely, she seemed to have seen the shadow of a kitten flash by. However, when she completely woke up and looked carefully, she couldn't see anything. Was it an illusion? The little girl tilted her head and didn't think too much of it. She turned her head to look at the bedside table. The cartoon alarm clock that Su Shenxing bought for her was pointing at 7 o'clock. Usually she would be woken up by the alarm clock at this time in the morning, or by Song Yuge, a sister who had already prepared breakfast. But today was the weekend, so she didn't turn on the alarm clock last night. It was rare for her to wake up naturally, but the girl woke up early as usual. After yawning, she tilted her head in confusion. She didn't know why, but she did feel a bit hot. Sakura Apartments was an old-fashioned apartment, so naturally, there was no central air conditioner or ventilation system installed. Because Su Shenxing was very poor, there was no air conditioner either. The only heater was placed in the living room to heat up the first floor. In fact, the real source of floor heating on the first floor was the underground hot spring, but other than Su Shenxing and Mo Li, almost no one knew about it. Therefore, the second floor was relatively cold in the winter, so it was strange that the girl woke up from the heat today. She immediately lifted the blanket and saw a little girl curled up under it. The child was called Yu Jingjing. She was much younger than Chiketsu and was the new tenant of Sakura Apartments. According to Su Shenxing, Yu Jingjing's parents were going to work abroad for a long time, so they left Yu Jingjing at Sakura Apartments. At first, Chiketsu thought she had a companion, but the little girl soon realized that Yu Jingjing was different from her. Compared to her, Yu Jingjing was much more introverted and quiet. She often locked herself in her room and spent the whole day alone. This also made Chiketsu feel that he was difficult to get close to. Even if she took the initiative to invite him out to play, he would usually refuse. However, because their rooms were very close to each other, and because Yu Jingjing didn't seem to be familiar with this room, because he hid in his room all day long, Sometimes she would go to Chiketsu's room after going to the bathroom in a daze at night. Seemed to be the same today. Oh, your face was so cute when you were sleeping, but why is it so cold when you wake up? Little Chiyo-yu poked the other party's face, causing the other party to mumble incoherently in its sleep. His body curled up into a ball like a kitten. Chiketsu carefully covered himself with the blanket without waking Chiketsu up. He was only wearing a cotton sweater, so he was exposed to the cold air. She shivered and quickly put on her clothes. After doing all this, she pulled open the curtains in the room. The morning sun shone into the room. Usually it would, but because of the bad weather today there was no sun shining into the room. However, there was a happy smile on the girl's face. Using a sentence that frequently appeared in elementary school essays about winter, the current scene was outside the window is a world covered in silver. The pure white scenery filled her entire vision. Although the snow was still falling, it was much lighter than yesterday. It was to the extent that she didn't need an umbrella even if she went out. Like most children, little Chiyo-yu loved snow out of her nature. She cheered, then covered her mouth as if she realized something. She turned around to look at the bed, and when she saw that Lu Jingjing didn't wake up, she breathed a sigh of relief and tiptoed out of the room. When she reached the corridor, she ran down the stairs on the old wooden floor with loud thuds. The situation on the first floor of Sakura Apartments was no different from usual. The sound of cooking could be heard from the kitchen. Judging from the sizzling sound, it should be the sound of eggs being fried. Looking from the stairs, she could vaguely see the kitchen. Asahi Sakura-kanji, wearing a maid uniform, was preparing breakfast. At this time, the sister who usually stayed with Sakura-kanji should still be sleeping. The girl thought in her heart. Although the sister usually looked smart, she was unexpectedly low in blood sugar. She was always in a daze in the morning. Once she ran out in her underwear and bumped into brother Sushinshing. Only then did she wake up and run back to her room screaming. When she thought of the chaotic scene, Chiketsu couldn't help but smile. She continued to walk forward and passed by the living room. Sushinshing usually read the newspaper, mainly looking at the recruitment page, and waited for breakfast, but today was a little different. He was talking with Xiao Jingyi. Anyway, according to that girl, the lethality of the card is equivalent to a small knife, so she didn't die. She's just at the Temple of the Earth and continues to take care of Jiang Jin's spirit veins. Compared to this, sure enough, he's talking about something I don't understand. The girl thought in her heart. Although she didn't know Sushinshing's specific job, the girl could vaguely sense that other than the usual work in classes, Sushinshing seemed to have other work to do. Last night he went out with Sister Mo Li, Sister Qin Xingyan, and the policeman in the living room. They didn't come back until very late. By the way, Qin Xingyan had to exercise early. Actually, he was doing morning classes, so he left at this time every day. However, he would come back on time for breakfast. She hoped that brother's work would be smooth. The girl secretly wished him well in her heart as she continued to walk forward. Behind the living room was the dining room, and behind that was the living room. When they passed by the living room, Chiketsu's eyes lit up. In the living room, Emoli was sitting on the sofa as usual, playing a video game from who knows where. Sister Emoli, let's go play in the snow. The girl ran towards Emoli. Emoli had a why? I want to stay at home and play video games expression on his face. Oh, you're right. Emoli, you should go out and play more like a normal child. Song Yu, who was folding clothes on the side, smiled sweetly and said, otherwise you'll become an otaku. If Su Shinshing heard this, he would most likely say no, it's too late or something along those lines. Unfortunately, neither Mo Li nor Chiketsu were good at complaining, so no one responded. Song Yu didn't feel awkward either. She took out a pair of gloves and a scarf from her clothes and put them on Chiketsu and Mo Li, then let the two girls go out together. Putting aside Jasmine's somewhat sulky appearance, the scene of the two Lolas walking hand in hand in the snow was rather lovey-dovey. Chapter 364. Although Emoli said she didn't want to, she still had a lot of fun when she started to push the snowman. I understand now. Jasmine, who had been questioning the use of the snowman all this while, suddenly had a look of realization on her face. The next step is to cast a spell to turn it into an ice colossus, right? Gajuxiang. Chiketsu tilted her head and a cute and confused expression appeared on her face. She obviously didn't understand the meaning of Mo Li's words. Although the other party didn't deny her speculation, Emoli also felt that something was wrong. So she decided to strategically move. Another carrot, right? I'll get it. She stood up from the pile of snow. Because she wasn't used to the old cotton-padded jacket, she patted the snowflakes on her body with a slightly clumsy movement. Then she shook her head to shake off the accumulated snowflakes on top of her head. After doing all this, she felt that something was missing. After a long while, she hammered her palm and added, "Go ahead." Chiketsu still had that cute and confused expression. If it was an anime or manga, her eyes should have turned into two Xiaohei dots. After returning to Sakura apartment, Emily didn't go directly to the kitchen to get the carrot. Instead, she quickly walked to the living room. At this time, other than Su Xinxing and Xiao Jingyi in the living room, Song Yu, who was folding clothes in the living room, seemed to have finished the work at hand and also came here. She was sitting on the sofa and listening to the conversation between the two men. In other words, the main purpose of you coming to me this time is to investigate the reason for the sudden snow this time? When the little girl walked into the living room, Su Xinxing summarized it succinctly, perhaps because he had just reached a part of the story. No, in fact, the original director of the super administrative office, the one you have also seen, has already investigated the reason for this time. This time I came to you mainly to ask you to find a way to stop this snow disaster. Xiao Jingyi corrected him. Snow disaster? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? Su Xinxing couldn't help but complain. Although yesterday's snow was really heavy, the snow is much lighter now, right? Although it doesn't snow much in Jiangjin, as a native of Jiangjin, I can tell you responsibly that there have been cases where it snowed heavily for a few days in a row and blocked the roads. If it was just normal snow, it wouldn't be considered a disaster. The problem is that this snow came too suddenly. There was no sign of it at all. Furthermore, the snow only fell in the area around Jiangjin. It was as if it was falling according to the boundaries of the land. The deviation was definitely not more than 3 centimeters. Now, some busybodies who are very interested in this phenomenon have already started to head to Jiangjin. Xiao Jingyi's face was full of exhaustion. To be honest, dealing with the eyewitness report of the entire road floating out of thin air like a snake twisted into a fried dough twist has already exhausted me. When those so-called supernatural enthusiasts really come to Jiangjin, who knows what other evidence they will find that I didn't have time to deal with. We don't get much overtime pay here. Then what's the reason for the snow? Hey, aren't you worried about your friend who is about to collapse from exhaustion? Here, take these orange peels that I just peeled off and eat them. Don't be shy. Are we really friends? Every time I come, I can't help but doubt this from the bottom of my heart. I don't know a friend who always asks me to solve all the problems at work. Don't say that. After all, we are comrades who have eaten together in Kaifeng. From what you've said, I can't tell that we're very familiar with each other. Su Xinxing sighed helplessly. Then he waved at Jasmine. The little girl obediently sat in Su Xinxing's arms. Su Xinxing took a towel and wiped the girl's long blonde hair that had become wet from the snow. How many times have I told you to be more careful when you go out to play? Aren't you all wet now? I think old Su, you will definitely be the kind of stupid father who will spoil his daughter. Xiao Jingyi came to this conclusion with certainty. It's not like what you said. Su Xinxing casually replied. Old Su, why do you sound like you have a daughter before? Could it be? Xiao Jingyi originally wanted to tease Su Xinxing, but halfway through his sentence he felt a strong spiritual pressure. He turned his head and saw Song Yu on the other side looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. Her expression clearly looked very gentle, but Xiao Jingyi always felt that the girl seemed to be emitting an ominous dark aura, so he immediately cowered. Cough. It's nothing, I'm just kidding. Mr. Landlord, what's the use of a snowman? Emoli squinted his eyes and enjoyed Su Xinxing's hair-drying service for a while, then raised his little head and asked Su Xinxing. It's just like the promotional CG of a domestic game. It's just for show, it's useless. Su Xinxing thought for a while, then gave an example that was easier to understand for Emoli. Oh, it's just like the hair tonic in Mr. Landlord's room. Piff. How do you know that my room has? Oh, I don't have. Sorry, I remembered wrong. Emoli said innocently. That's right, I didn't. Su Xinxing guiltily looked away. It's hair tonic shampoo. Emoli continued. Say it. Careful, do you want me to make some kelp for lunch? It's said to have hair tonic effects. Or something like that. Song Yu added with a gentle expression. No need. On the side, Xiao Jingyi helplessly scratched his head as he watched this family-like warm interaction while drinking tea that had already cooled down. Well, although I'm sorry for interrupting your group crosstalk, can we continue to talk about business? What's business? Su Shenxing shouted Jigit in his heart and immediately used this topic to escape from the hell of hair and hairlines. It's about the main cause of the snow disaster. Xiao Jingyi wasn't angry. After all, even if he was angry, he couldn't beat Su Shenxing. This level of self-restraint had long been practiced. According to Chief Su Feng's investigation, it's very likely because of the earth vein leakage. Even if the original earth god used herself as a human sacrifice and temporarily lived in the earth temple as a spiritual body to stabilize the earth vein in Jiangjin, she wasn't the real earth god after all. In addition, the spirit vein was damaged too much in the previous disaster, so a considerable amount of spiritual energy is still slowly leaking out. Then how do we solve this situation? Su Shenxing asked casually. I don't know. Xiao Jingyi very casually spread out his hands and answered. Well, it seems like we have to go to the earth temple again. Su Shenxing could only sigh again. I feel like I seem to have forgotten something. Mo Li, who was sitting in Su Shenxing's arms, suddenly tilted her head and muttered with some confusion. Say it. Outside the room. Achoo. Chiketsu, whose little nose was red from the cold, cutely sneezed and then made a pitiful sound. Sister Molly, so slow. Chapter 365. Chihaya-sama, Chihaya-sama. With Asahi Sakurakanji's call, Chihaya Fukuyama woke up in a daze. The young girl sat up. Because her sleeping posture wasn't too good, her hair was messy and curled up on top of her head. Hey, what time is it now? She yawned and stretched before asking Asahi Sakurakanji, who was dressed as a maid for some reason. It's almost noon, Miko-sama replied. Oh, are you here to wake me up for lunch? Chizeo Shinshan asked as she put on her clothes. Her graceful figure soon disappeared under the winter clothes in the Sakura apartment. Although a change in temperature would not cause her to catch a cold or anything after becoming a god, it was hard to change a habit after being a human for so many years. Moreover, there was no need to deliberately change it in various situations. No, there's still some time before lunch. In fact, Miko-sama is downstairs right now, Asahi Sakurakanji said with a wry smile as he explained the main reason he came to wake his master up. What? Why is she here again? Chihaya Fukuyama, who was wearing cotton leggings, was stunned. Then, because she couldn't keep her balance on one foot, she started swaying on the carpet. Asahi Sakurakanji hurriedly went up to support her. Miko-sama seems to be looking for Mr. Su, but because Mr. Su isn't home, Miss Song Yu and Miss Qin Xingyan aren't familiar with each other, so the only one who can receive Miko-sama is you, Chihaya-sama. I don't know if I should be happy that I'm useful as a diner who has nothing to do, or sad that I'm only useful as a god in receiving friends from the past. Chihaya Fukuyama muttered with a complicated expression as she put on her leggings and took out a ribbon from her dresser drawer. Miko-sama? I know. Chihaya Fukuyama held the ribbon in her mouth and gathered her long hair behind her head with both hands, as if she was going to tie it into a simple ponytail. Master Chinzao, it's obvious that I can do this kind of thing. Seeing this, Sakura Asahi took the ribbon from Chinzao's mouth and carefully tied it for her, tying it into a beautiful bow. Compared to a few months ago, I was still an ordinary high school girl. I'm still not used to being served like this. Chihaya Fukuyama shook her head awkwardly. Anyway, you can go down and chat with her for a while. I have to wash up and put on some light makeup. As for me, what should I talk to young Miss Fei Gong about? Sakura Kobayashi Asahi could not help but ask with some fear. Anything is fine as long as it can pass the time. For example, telling dirty jokes or something. What? I'm not very good at this. I can talk for a long time if it's BL. Stop, don't spread the gay atmosphere in this apartment. Chihaya Fukuyama suddenly realized that she had made the wrong decision and quickly stopped him from preaching. At this time, she inadvertently glanced out the window and showed a surprised expression. That's the Aurora? Asahi Sakurakanji heard and followed Chihaya Fukuyama's gaze to look out the window. However, other than the gray sky and the falling snow, there was no aurora. There's nothing? Sahi, can't you see it? Chihaya Fukuyama could not help but frown. In her eyes, in the sky outside the window, There was indeed a gorgeous aurora swaying like a curtain on a stage, as if announcing the beginning of something. Aurora? You must be seeing things. In the living room of Sakura's apartment, Hanakyu and Yuan looked at Wu Yejin suspiciously. If you really want to say something, this place should be in the subtropics. How can there be an aurora? Although the girl had injured her leg yesterday and could not do any intense exercise, she could still walk like a normal person with the talisman on her. But I clearly saw it, Wu Yejin said unwillingly. But let's not talk about me. Even that sister of yours didn't see it. Hanakyu and Yuan shrugged and said. In this regard, Mizuki Takemiya, who was dragged into the conversation, could only helplessly smile. This made Wu Yejin's expression become even more depressed. The longer strands of hair on both sides of her head drooped down on her shoulders like a listless dog's ears. As the conversation was in Japanese, Qin Xingyan and Song Yu, who were sitting opposite them, were confused. They had no idea what the guests were here for. At this time there was the sound of footsteps coming down the stairs. After a while, Chihaya Fukuyama and Asahi Sakura Kanji came to the living room together. Long time no see, Rueishi. Chihaya Fukuyama raised her head and showed a confident and sunny smile. Her long ponytail also swayed with her movements. No, if I remember correctly, we just met 2 days ago. The atmosphere became awkward. Is Jiangjin a special place where auroras are easy to appear? In a certain apartment in Jiangjin, Chang Shaoxian leaned against the window and looked at the colorful aurora in the sky. I remember something like this happened half a year ago. That wasn't a real aurora. Hecate's attention shifted from the TV to the sky. She looked at the so-called aurora and immediately said, "Forgive me for being blunt. Everyone here is trash?" Chang Shaoxian subconsciously continued. I think little master should stop looking at emoticons on the internet. After being speechless for a moment, Hecate, who had turned into a leopard, complained with a depressed expression. What I mean is, although you have Chang-sama's inheritance, your vision and experience are too limited. There are a lot of things that you can't see through the appearance of the truth. I remember now. Artemis, who was pretending to be asleep, suddenly raised his ferret-like head. Hecate, thousands of years ago, you accidentally destroyed the spirit vein of the Guanghan secret realm. At that time, the sky of the Guanghan Palace also had a similar phenomenon. No one will think you're mute if you don't say anything. Hecate roared at Artemis fiercely. The latter skillfully slipped out of the door like a wisp of smoke. At this time, the rabbit-eared girl, who was wearing a maid costume, sponsored by Sakura Apartment, and holding a tray, was walking to the door. As Artemis, who had turned into a winged raccoon, ran past her feet, she couldn't help but scream. She staggered a few steps forward before she managed to maintain her balance and not knock over the 3 drinks on the tray. Sama Artemis, please don't run around. It's very dangerous. The rabbit-eared girl couldn't help but cry. When can I go back to the moon? When you're still on Earth? You actually forgot about my existence. That's too much. Chapter 366. Just as some special residents of Jiangjin saw the strange aurora in the sky, Su Xinxing and the others had once again arrived at the Earth Shrine. I felt that it was about time for you to come. The former Earth God stood at the entrance of the Earth Shrine and said softly. Due to the effects of the Buttering card, or rather the talisman of 10,000 spells, the former Earth God's body had already turned into sand. Naturally, only her soul was left. Not only that, but because she had made an oath to protect Jiangjin and the humans on this land, she would not be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation in a short period of time. She could only be locked in the Earth Shrine in the form of a soul and manage and solve various affairs on this land day after day. How's that fellow? Su Xinxing asked. The former Earth God shook her head. She hasn't woken up yet. Is that so? Even Su Xinxing could only sigh helplessly. Although she had returned to her normal appearance from her petrified state, the Earth God had not woken up and was still in a state of coma. Her divine power has clearly been restored to its most abundant state and her injuries have been completely healed. However, Xiao Yi still doesn't seem to be waking up. Even the former Earth God revealed a troubled expression. By the way, do you know the cause of the heavy snow in the past 2 days? Under Xiao Jingyi's hint, Su Xinxing also remembered the main purpose of their visit and asked the former Earth God. Yes, the weather is chaotic. This is also a manifestation of the disorder of the spiritual energy. The former earth god replied with a bitter smile, because I don't have the divinity of the earth god, I can't have absolute control over this land like Shao Yi. And for some reason the spiritual veins on this land are not very stable. Because of my previous ruckus, she smiled apologetically at Su Shenxing, it caused the spiritual veins to become even more unstable. To be honest, blocking the spiritual veins to prevent them from completely leaking out is the best I can do. I don't have the spare energy to care about some small omissions in other places. In other words, the current situation is caused by those small omissions? Shao Jingyi didn't seem to like the other party's way of saying that he was trying to shirk responsibility, so he emphasized the word little. That's right. Although I really don't want to admit it, this is the truth. The other party lowered his head and apologized sincerely to a mortal. I'm sorry because my ability is limited. Her frankness put Shao Jingyi in a difficult position. In the end, he could only run to the corner of the room to smoke. Su Shenxing took out a lighter from his pocket and suddenly came to life. He shouted, "Spray flame," and then a flame more than a foot high shot out, almost setting Shao Jingyi's hair on fire. Su Shenxing felt a little embarrassed and continued to ask the other party, "Is there no other way?" The former earth god shook his head. At this time Shao Jingyi, who had hurriedly extinguished the flame of the lighter, turned around and said as if he had thought of something, "Wait a minute, I'll report the information here to the director. Maybe he will have a way." "This is underground. Can you use your phone?" Su Shenxing's eyes were half open and he asked without enthusiasm. "It's fine. My phone has been specially modified by the super administrative office. With the blessing of ancient spells I can type 350 words per minute. No matter when or where I can complete calls, texts and voice messages instantly. I'm a hero of the mobile phone." Shao Jingyi proudly showed off and began to make calls. Not to mention underground, it said that it can even connect to the bottom of the sea. A moment later. "You are outside the service area. Please ensure that the communication is smooth before replaying the call. Thank you for your support." "Thank you. *CKY. Because although from a physical point of view, this is only the underground, from a mystical point of view, this is the domain of God. Even if it's not the kingdom of God, it's not far from it." The former earth god explained to Shao Jingyi, "Communication equipment in the human world, how is it possible?" Before he finished speaking, Su Shenxing's phone rang. "Oh, Miss Yamanaka? Mizuki Takemiya is here? They said that they're going back to Fusang today?" Ignoring the former earth god who was stunned, Su Shenxing continued to listen to the news from his protected phone. Mizuki Takemiya came to the Celestial Empire in the name of inspecting the investment environment. After staying here for nearly half a month, it was almost time to leave. After all, the behemoth Phimea Financial Group could do without anyone except for Mizuki Takemiya. Even in this era, telecommuting was not inconceivable, but if she didn't appear in person, she was afraid that the higher-ups there would do something dirty in secret because of the lack of deterrence. Based on these reasons, coupled with the girl's complicated psychology, she finally decided to set off to return to Fusang today. Originally, when she set off to Sakura apartment, she wanted to see Su Shenxing again. If possible, she wanted to ask all the questions she cared about. However, things didn't go as planned. When they arrived at Sakura apartment, Su Shenxing had already left. The two missed each other by a hair's breadth. Chihaya Fukuyama also suggested that she delay for a while and let Su Shenxing rush home to meet the other party, but Su Shenxing refused after hesitating for a while. Although she didn't know why, Su Shenxing felt that there would always be some dangerous things happening around her. Instead of letting the other party get involved in those messy things, it was better to let her live an ordinary and happy life like an ordinary person. After hanging up the phone, Su Shenxing found that Shao Jingyi was gone. She asked Mo Li, who was watching from the side, and found out that the other party ran outside the Earth Temple to make a phone call. After a while, Shao Jingyi finally ran back, huffing and puffing. "I've asked clearly." The bureau got the conclusion from a highly respected master's divination. Hey, it's a bit childish to pin Jiangjin's hopes on a fortune teller." Even Su Shenxing couldn't help but complain. However, Shao Jingyi didn't give up because of this. Instead, he continued, "According to the information obtained, there are two ways to solve it. The first is to strip the soul of the current Earth God, then let the former Earth God take over and be reborn. With the godhead, the former earth god should be able to fully suppress the spirit veins and prevent the spirit energy from leaking out. Crooked methods? Is there any other way? Su Shenxing curled her lips in disdain. Yes, according to the master's divination, the current earth god hasn't woken up because she has fallen into her own past dream. As long as we can sneak into her dream and untie the knot in her heart, we should be able to wake her up. Xiao Jingyi said with a serious expression. Why do I feel like it's a trap? Su Shenxing scratched his face, feeling a little strange. Chapter 367. After the heavy snow, the entire Jiangjin County was covered in a layer of winter clothes, and the world seemed to have returned to its original pure white. In the large courtyard behind the brothel, a little girl was squatting by the well, washing clothes that were piled up like a mountain. Because the well was very deep, it didn't freeze even in the winter, but because of this, it became more difficult to get a bucket of water. The little girl struggled to pull the wooden bucket out of the well. Then she staggered to the side of the wooden basin and poured half of the water that had been spilled into it. After doing all this, she used her little hand that was about to lose consciousness to touch her face that was red from the cold, then squinted her eyes and breathed out a white breath. Is that child what Jiangjin's current earth god looked like when she was young? From her clothes, she should be from the Eastern Song dynasty, and the passers-by were talking about the invasion of the Silver Kingdom, so it's very likely that it's already the end of the Eastern Song dynasty. Piske, the famous war era in the history of the Celestial Empire. In a small alley not far away, Xiao Jingyi poked his head out and looked at the courtyard. Because the courtyard door wasn't closed, the situation inside could be seen at a glance. But speaking of which, Emoli can actually invade people's dreams. As he spoke, he took out the remaining half of the Yuanrong sword from his waist bag. Interestingly, the Yuanrong sword was much larger than his waist bag. And he can even bring in objects from the real world. This performance is so high that it's against the rules. Moli thought for a moment, then said with his usual expression, I'm very ashamed, I only did some small work. Hey, in order to awaken the sleeping earth god Loli, they needed to interfere with her dream. Originally, Xiao Jingyi's plan was to use a spherical object called Dream Bomb, dimensional wall collapser, of unknown origin, to enter her dream. However, Su Shenxing politely declined the name and appearance of this thing, and in the end he simply let Emoli, who had recently improved greatly due to the seal loosening, open the boundary between dream and reality, and drag them into the earth god Loli's dream. However, he did not expect that the first scene he saw after entering the dream would be the other party's tragic childhood. Theoretically speaking, interrupting Miss Earth God's dream can wake her up. Then the simplest way is to rush in now and take her away before the incident happens. This is equivalent to ruining the plot. Once the plot is ruined, the dream will naturally be interrupted. Xiao Jingyi took the lead and suggested. Since you didn't directly jump out to cause trouble, it means that the method you talked about is risky, right? Su Shenxing wasn't encouraged by him and directly went to kidnap the lowly. Instead he asked rather calmly. Yes, according to the prophecy of that master clairvoyant, the success rate of this method is about 50%. Apart from that, there's also a 50% chance that the dream will become a mess, and will be trapped inside and unable to escape. However, with Emoli here this risk can be ignored. There's also an extremely small possibility that the disappearance of the dream that represents the past will cause the current earth god's spiritual death. Xiao Jingyi didn't seem to want to hide anything, so he answered honestly. If the dream becomes a mess, what will the consequences be? I'm talking about the situation where we've already escaped, Su Shenxing continued to ask. I don't know. That master clairvoyant didn't make a prophecy, or rather he made a prophecy but didn't tell me. Xiao Jingyi shrugged and spread out his hands with a helpless look on his face. Su Shenxing thought about it, but in the end he didn't directly go to the other party. Knowing how bad his luck was, he didn't want to take a gamble. In short, it's better to wait and see, he said softly. Moreover, even if he wanted to change the plot, he had to at least wait for the plot to start. Moreover, it wasn't like the infinite flow where he could be said to be in a state where he didn't know anything about the plot. He didn't even have a secret keeper who could prompt and push the plot forward through the phone. It was really too disadvantageous. At this moment, there seemed to be an unhappy voice coming from the girl's side. A man who looked like a cross between a pimp and a henchman had appeared in the backyard at some point and was yelling at the trembling little girl. I spent a lot of money to buy you from the human trafficker. I didn't buy you for free. You can't even wash a few pieces of clothes. What's the use of having you? Hey, I just happened to hear that the newly arrived Master Wang is fond of you. Instead of letting you continue to waste food like this, it's better to send you to Master Wang to open your buds and earn some money. I'm sorry. The little girl trembled even more and apologized to the other party with tears in her eyes. However, the man was being unreasonable, so naturally he wouldn't forgive the little girl just because of her apology. Therefore, he roughly grabbed the little girl's arm and dragged her into the room of the brothel. I've changed my mind. Su Xinxing revealed a smile that made Xiao Jingyi's hair stand on end. Do you want to see a shooting star? If that guy is inserted into the moon, when the day after tomorrow when the dynasty participates in dividing up the moon's resources, it'll be since ancient times, right? Can you be a little cold-hearted? This is just a dream. Xiao Jingyi hurriedly stopped Su Xinxing, who was about to walk into the courtyard. At this time, Emily had unknowingly pulled out an icicle from a nearby room and aimed it at the man. According to the usual plot, at this time, a hero should appear and save the damsel in distress. Although it was difficult to confirm whether a little girl with a body like firewood could be considered beautiful. However, when the hero appeared, Su Xinxing and the others were stunned. Stop. Unknowingly, a handsome young man in luxurious clothes appeared at the entrance of the courtyard and shouted at the man. Running into someone else's courtyard and asking the owner to stop. Are you crazy? Originally, the man was a little afraid of the young man's luxurious clothes. However, when he remembered that the person he wanted to please was the newly appointed county magistrate, and that in this chaotic era, the habit of valuing the civil over the military was still engraved in everyone's hearts. In a place like Jiangjin where the sky was high and the emperor was far away, the county magistrate could already be considered a local emperor. Therefore the man straightened his back. Seeing that you're dressed like a scholar, don't you know that County Magistrate Wang is inside? If you disturb County Magistrate Wang, you'll be in big trouble. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, the scholar snorted coldly. Then a buzzing sound came from nowhere and the brothel exploded like a pot of boiling water. Countless disheveled men and women ran out of the brothel. Naturally, County Magistrate Wang was among them. Then dark hornets swarmed out of the room and chased after the men and women like dark clouds. At the same time they cried for their parents and wished they had more legs. County Magistrate Wang was so angry that he shouted, "Is this how your Yitzi courtyard receives guests? If you can't deal with these damned things, then your brothel doesn't need to continue operating." "Is this the disturbance you mentioned?" The young man sneered. "But I think the person who is in big trouble is you." At this time Su Xinxing and the others had already realized that the young man was actually the former earth god who disguised herself as a man. However, compared to human women, it was much more convenient for her as a god to disguise as a man. If Su Xinxing and the others didn't know the former god, they definitely wouldn't have thought that this flat-chested guy with an obvious Adam's apple was actually a woman. Chapter 368. Zhuo Xiangzhu felt a sense of accomplishment for being able to scare the pimp so much that he didn't even dare to accept the money before handing over the little girl's slave contract. It was probably because she could always find this kind of entertainment in the human world that she never got tired of playing in the human world. Zhuo Xiangzhu brought the little girl out of the brothel and burned the slave contract in front of the little girl. Your home shouldn't be too far away from here, right? Now that the slave contract is gone, you can go home, she persuaded the little girl. Originally, this matter was just something he did casually. As a native Huaxia god, this kind of thing was enough. It was not appropriate for him to get involved too much and be contaminated with too much karma. However, the little girl just lowered her head and didn't say anything. Wherever Zhuo Xiangzhu went, she followed. On this cold day, the little girl only had a thin layer of clothing on her body. Her whole body kept shivering because of the cold, not to mention the pair of thin cloth shoes on her feet. When she walked on the unshoveled snow, the crunching sound made people subconsciously want to shrink their necks from the cold. Even so, the little girl didn't complain. She still silently followed behind Zhuo Xiangzhu. This made Zhuo Xiangzhu a little vexed. As a god, it wasn't difficult to get rid of the little girl if she sped up a little. But then wouldn't it be meaningless for her to save the little girl? In the end, she could only stop and look back at the little girl. She said helplessly, "So didn't I tell you to go home? Why do you keep following me? I don't have the luxury to take care of idlers." The little girl was silent for a long time. When Zhuo Xiangju's patience was about to run out, she slowly said, "My father died on the battlefield. My stepfather was addicted to gambling. Last year he sold me to a human trafficker for 3 coins of silver. My mother watched me being taken away with her own eyes. No matter how much I cried and screamed, she didn't even reach out to stop them. Even if I do go home now, I will only be sold again." Speaking of this, the girl smiled bitterly. "Furthermore, there's an 80% chance that I won't meet a kind-hearted person like you next time. Instead of living the life of a prostitute who pretends to be happy in front of people but washes her face with tears behind people, I'd rather freeze to death in the corner of the street. Since that's the case, I'll give you 50 taels of silver. Although it's not much, it's enough for you to settle down and live a stable life for a few years. Is that okay?" Because Zhuo Xiangju became a god through incense, he did not cultivate the great path of ruthlessness. Therefore, his emotions were basically the same as a normal person's. After listening to the girl's words, although he sympathized with her, he could not just casually let a little girl become a god's servant, right? In addition, because the reason was a little more complicated than he had imagined, the cause and effect might be much greater than he had expected at the beginning. Thus, she decided to spend some money to sever this karma. It could also be considered as training in the mortal world and a step towards perfecting her Tao heart. "My lord is kind, but now the flames of war are raging and bandits are everywhere. Even a rich family may not be able to protect their wealth, let alone a child like me." The little girl shook her head and rejected Zhuo Xiangju's suggestion, which could be considered a great temptation to ordinary people. After all, in the era of war, 50 taels of silver's purchasing power was much more practical than that of cash. Ordinary people might not even be able to gather so much cash in one go. She said in an exceptionally rational manner, "Not to mention the bandits who rob my house. Even if the ruffians on the street see my lord leave, they can snatch my money away in the blink of an eye." Zhuo Xiangju was a little surprised. If these words were said by an adult, it would be normal, but coming from a little girl, it was a little surprising. However, from this, it could also be seen how much this little girl had suffered to have such a mature mentality. Unfortunately, even so, he could not carelessly make her his servant. In fact, this kind of mature child was more likely to develop a distorted worldview and eccentric character because of some things that they experienced when they were young. Fortunately, the life of a god was extremely long. Even if she came to the mortal world to patrol for 8 to 10 years, it was just a snap of the fingers for her. Thus, he had plenty of time to observe her character. "In that case, you can follow me for a while." Hearing what he said, the little girl's face immediately showed joy. However, it could be seen that she was indeed mature. Even at this time, she did not forget to be polite. She bowed to Zhuo Xiangju and thanked him. "Thank you, my lord." "Don't call me lord." As the earth god, even if the officials of this land called him lord, he could completely accept it, let alone a little girl. However, Zhuo Xiangju himself did not like to be called that. "Call me lord. Young master Zhuo will do." "Okay, young master." The little girl replied obediently. "By the way, what's your name?" Zhuo Xiangju nodded with satisfaction and then asked the little girl. "I don't have a name. When I was at home, my parents called me lord, my stepfather called me a bastard, and the manager of the brothel called me a stinky girl." The little girl answered honestly. "In that case, you can just take my surname Zhuo." Zhuo Xiangju was not the kind of person who liked to dawdle. He immediately said this. She looked around and finally found that the somewhat gloomy sky was covered by a thick sea of clouds. However, the clouds were covered with ripple-like patterns. At first glance, it looked very beautiful. He decided, "My name will be Uni. How about the name Zhui Uni?" "As you wish, young master." The little girl bowed again, but the joy in her eyes could not be concealed. "Okay, Uni, let's go and eat first." Zhuo Xiangju smiled and strode forward. Zhui Uni. From today onwards, I'll be called Zhui Uni." Only then did the little girl reveal a happy and excited smile. Carrying the hope for the future, she quickly followed her new master step by step. At a nearby street corner. "So the earth god is called Zhui Uni?" Su Xinxing had a look of realization. Emoli also nodded in agreement. "So you don't know her real name?" Xiao Jingyi ridiculed with an embarrassed expression. "Because when she first appeared, she called herself the earth god. I thought the earth god was her name." Su Xinxing replied innocently. Hey, do you really think of her as a friend?" Xiao Jingyi's expression became even more embarrassed. Friends are baseball, Emily said seriously. At least it's football. Even kicking her is better than beating her with a stick. Xiao Jingyi ridiculed 3 times in a row. Stop fooling around, they're going far away. Let's hurry up and catch up. Su Xinxing interrupted Xiao Jingyi's words. Who is the reason I ridiculed her? Chapter 369. Just as Su Xinxing and the others caught up with the master and servant duo, the surrounding scenery suddenly changed drastically. It was as if they were playing Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11. The white snow fluttering in the air suddenly turned into bright sunshine. Even the temperature changed from the bitter winter where one could breathe white smoke to summer where one could fry an egg on the limestone floor. F***ck, what's going on? Xiao Jingyi was stunned. Don't be so noisy, be careful not to be discovered by that girl. Isn't it normal to casually pass a few years in a dream? Su Xinxing, on the other hand, had an expression that said, don't be surprised, I've seen this kind of thing many times. Even Jasmine had a calm expression on her face as she munched on a celestial shell that she had taken out from God knows where. To be honest, this girl's blonde hair and blue eyes were incompatible with the surrounding atmosphere of the ancient Chinese dynasty. It always gave people the feeling that they were filming a period film and a foreign spectator had snuck into the set. It was just that for some reason the surrounding passers-by turned a blind eye to it. In addition to the season, Earth God Loli had also grown a little. She had changed from a young girl to a genuine Loli. Zhua Xiangzhu, the former Earth God, who was originally walking in front of Earth God Loli, had also changed from male clothing to female clothing. Her breast had also become slightly bigger. At first Xiao Jingyi even thought that after the change of season, the passers-by on the street would just be the background. However, when he tried to talk to the NPCs, he found that they could actually communicate with them. This is starting to make me wonder if we're actually in a dream. After asking about the specific year, date and various trivial matters of the other party's life, Xiao Jingyi finally came to this conclusion after seeing the other party's expression of "You're an idiot, aren't you?" What's so strange about this? Facing Xiao Jingyi, who had turned into a curious child, Su Xinxing could only continue to helplessly explain. Gods and mortals are different. Even if Jiang Jin's current Earth God Loli looks like a child, she is still a person who has lived for thousands of years. There are more people in her mind and she has a deeper understanding of them. It's not that difficult to construct such a personality in a dream, right? You just wanted to say Earth God's name but realized that you couldn't remember, so you just casually said it, right? Please don't change the topic to cover up your lack of knowledge. You really don't remember. How is that possible? Su Xinxing turned his face away and said expressionlessly. What's her name? Zhua? Cormorant? That's nonsense. Zhuat #yen%*. You don't remember. Why don't you admit you don't remember? I have a disease that makes me die of embarrassment if I admit it. Zhuj was. Be careful, we're about to be discovered. At this time Jasmine, who was silently eating a celestial shell, suddenly opened her mouth. Then she took a big bite of the celestial shell, and as if she had thought of something, she added incoherently, "Speak." Hearing her say this, Xiao Jingyi immediately became nervous. He dragged Su Xinxing and Emily into a small alley by the side of the road, and immediately asked, if we're discovered, will there be any problems? If this was really the Earth God's dream, then once they were discovered they might be immediately expelled. Even though he hadn't read novels or anime for a long time because of work, Xiao Jingyi still remembered the concept of corrective power. Nothing will happen. Emily chewed for a while, swallowed the food in her mouth and then replied, at most, Mushroom will feel that we're a little familiar. Then what's the use of telling us to be careful? Xiao Jingyi felt that he might be killed by this pair of buffoons before Jiang Jin was destroyed. What do you know? Su Xinxing lectured with a serious face. If we're not noticed by the other party, then when we want to affect the plot, no matter when we appear, it won't be too abrupt. But once we're noticed by the other party, when we appear, the other party will immediately be vigilant. Why are you so familiar with this? Humph. Su Xinxing once again showed a look that said, don't be surprised, I've seen this kind of thing many times, which made Xiao Jingyi gnash his teeth in anger. Just as the group of people were talking, the master and servant in front of them suddenly turned into a shop. Xiao Jingyi and the others hurried over and found that it was actually a shop that sold rouge, face powder and the like. Do gods also buy these kinds of things? Xiao Jingyi muttered to himself, speaking of which the previous earth god has changed back into female attire. Does that mean that she has already told Zhui Yuni the secret that she is the earth god? Not only that, but that person has also become the earth god's servant. Seems like 100 years have passed. Su Shenxing confirmed Xiao Jingyi's guess and corrected him. How can you tell? Xiao Jingyi asked in surprise. Because that person has a talisman on her body that requires magical power to activate. Su Shenxing pointed in Zhui Yuni's direction with his mouth. Xiao Jingyi fixed his eyes on her. Sure enough, he saw a corner of a talisman peeking out from her belt. It seemed that when she stuffed the talisman into her belt, she didn't seem to notice it. Then how do you know that it's been 100 years? Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but ask in admiration. Look over there. Su Shenxing raised his hand and pointed in a direction. Xiao Jingyi looked in the direction he pointed and saw that it was probably a rich family's house. There was a row of ceremonial items placed in front of the door. What's that? That's called a yuanzhang. It's a ceremonial item used by some of the nobles in the Meng dynasty. At the same time, the Meng dynasty was the only dynasty that used such items. Moreover, the Meng dynasty only lasted for about 90 years. The early and later periods were all in a period of war. Only the middle period was relatively peaceful. Based on this, you can more or less guess the current era. Su Shenxing explained the basis of his guess. I might have met a fake old Su. Xiao Jingyi showed an expression of disbelief. Don't mess around, I'm not stupid. I'm just too lazy to use my brain. Of course, I can do this kind of reasoning that isn't too difficult. Leaving things to the people who are good at it has always been my principle. Su Shenxing waved his hand dismissively. Also, I can only guess so much. If it was that guy, he might even be able to guess the color of their underwear. Don't women in ancient times usually wear undergarments? Xiao Jingyi asked stupidly. Su Shenxing and Mo Li simultaneously showed an expression that said, that's not the point, okay? Xiao Jingyi could only raise his hands in surrender. As they chatted, the three of them walked into the shop together. After entering, Su Shenxing discovered that this shop didn't only sell rouge and face powder. They also sold jewelry such as gold ornaments and jade bracelets. Many of them looked quite expensive. Moreover, it was obvious that this shop was very wealthy. The space in the shop was not small and there were many customers. With so many people coming and going, as long as they were careful to keep a distance, they shouldn't be discovered by those two people. Miss, look at this jade hairpin, it's so beautiful. Different from the despairing and cold little girl in winter, the little girl who had not yet become the earth god looked much more lively and cheerful. At this time she was shouting at Zhuo Xiangzhu at the counter. Su Shenxing looked in the direction of the girl and saw a very beautiful jade hairpin. In the past, when Su Shenxing watched TV, he didn't like jade products very much. There was no other reason than that he simply thought they were ugly. But this jade hairpin was completely different. Just by being displayed on the counter, it gave people a feeling of spiritual radiance. The other jade products placed next to it were all overshadowed because of this. Even in Su Shenxing's eyes, it could be considered beautiful. Indeed, as an ordinary item, it's already very amazing that the material and carving skills can reach this level. Zhuo Xiangzhu, who originally just wanted to have fun in the shop, couldn't help but nod in agreement with her maid's words. It was also a kind of pleasure to be able to find such an exquisite item in the mortal world. But when she was about to pay for it, the boss shook his head and told her that this jade hairpin didn't belong to the shop. A few days ago there was a scholar whose mother was seriously ill. The scholar didn't have much money on hand and didn't have much time to borrow money from his best friends one by one. So he pawned the family heirloom jade hairpin in exchange for some money to deal with the emergency. However, he didn't pawn it for death but for a living one. As long as the scholar could bring the ransom today, this hairpin would be returned to him. Hearing the boss's words, Zhuo Xiangzhu felt that it was a pity, but she didn't say anything. After all, it was just an ordinary item and it wasn't worth it for her to use her magical power. At this time Su Shenxing seemed to have sensed something and raised his head. He saw that not far away, there was a bookish man holding something in his arms and walking quickly towards them with an excited smile on his face. But just as he was about to reach them, a few Meng soldiers on horseback suddenly galloped past, and one of them even knocked the man down. The man whose leg was scratched was caught off guard and fell to the ground. The few silver ingots in his arms also fell out and rolled to the side. When the Meng soldiers saw this, they immediately turned their horses around. Ignoring the scholar's cries, they snatched the money and beat the scholar up. They also took the remaining silver ingots and money bags from the scholar's arms. "Old Su, why are you stopping me?" Xiao Jingyi, who was filled with righteous indignation and wanted to help, was stopped by Su Shenxing. He asked Su Shenxing with dissatisfaction. "What do you want to do? Beat up those Meng soldiers, then take back the money and stop the plot from progressing? Do you want us to wander around in this dream?" Su Shenxing's words calmed Xiao Jingyi down, but as a police officer he still felt very angry. The scholar, who was covered in wounds, dragged his injured leg and knelt in front of the shop, crying loudly. He felt that he had lost his family heirloom and was too ashamed to go home. Just when everyone was still grieving over the scholar's misfortune, the scholar suddenly wiped his tears. Before anyone could react, he slammed his head against the signboard at the entrance of the shop. It seemed like he wanted to kill himself in front of the shop. Su Shenxing had already sensed the scholar's desire to die. When the scholar ran towards the signboard, he gently patted Mo Li's little head. The little girl understood and turned the air around the signboard as soft as cotton. Although she couldn't do it too obviously because she didn't want to attract attention, at least she could ensure that the scholar wouldn't die. At most he would just get a bump. However, at almost the same time another person acted. It was unknown when Zhuo Xiangzhu had appeared at the entrance of the shop. She raised her hand and chopped down. Oh no, she raised her slender leg and kicked the scholar to the ground. Immediately the scholar's head hit the ground and began to bleed. Cough cough. Although it was really tragic, Su Shenxing almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. What the hell was this? Saving someone only made the other party more seriously injured. Why did you save me? The scholar didn't care that his head was bleeding and his forehead was still bleeding. He just angrily said, "I'm just an unfilial son who lost his family heirloom. Don't tell me that I don't even have the right to die? No, I just don't like people dying in front of me." Zhuo Xiangzhu flipped his long hair. This action made Su Shenxing feel like he was hearing an advertisement saying, "And compared to death, there's only hope if you live." "Listen to this line," Xiao Jingyi whispered. "If I didn't know that this was the dream of the Earth God, I would almost think of her as the main character. Marry Su." Jasmine also muttered in a low voice. Su Shenxing thought about it carefully. Mysterious identity, beautiful as a flower, powerful and rich as a country. Yes, this was indeed AF * King Mary Su setting. But However, the people of this era obviously didn't have the experience of swearing. The scholar was stunned. "I have no hope. There will always be hope. Evil people will naturally have their retribution." Zhuo Xiangzhu naturally didn't know that Su Shenxing and the rest were silently criticizing her. She only glanced in the direction of the Meng soldiers with a mocking smile. Then she snapped her fingers and continued, "Since it's just a matter of money, there will always be a way." "Yes, miss." The Earth God immediately took out a gold ingot and handed it to Zhuo Xiangzhu. The latter then handed it to the scholar. "Consider this as a temporary loan. You can return it to me when you become rich. I can't thank you enough. Please leave your name so that I can repay you in the future." The scholar did not avoid suspicion. He took the gold ingot and bowed to the girl. "Zhuo Xiangzhu. My name is Zhuo Xiangzhu." The girl also left her name. The scholar nodded and limped towards the shop with his injured leg. At this time Zhuo Xiangzhu stopped him. "Miss, is there anything else?" The scholar asked curiously. "Zhuo Xiangzhu sighed. Then she took out a silk handkerchief and wrapped the wound on the scholar's head. "You are obviously injured. Why don't you care about it? Your body, hair and skin belong to your parents. Aren't you being unfilial?" The scholar, who had never been so close to the opposite sex, was stunned. His mind was in a mess and he didn't know how to answer the girl's question. His face turned red. Unfortunately, due to excessive bleeding on his head, there might be a lack of blood. In addition, due to objective reasons, it couldn't be described as dripping blood because he was really bleeding. Chapter 370. I feel like we're on the wrong set. Xiao Jingyi hesitated for a moment and whispered, "No matter how I look at it, this has nothing to do with the current Earth God. It's basically just talking about the previous Earth God." Could it be that Emoli's hand slipped and sent us into the wrong dream? Even Su Shinxing was a little confused by what he said. According to Emoli's usual style of cheating, it wasn't impossible. Excuse me. Emoli, who was eating candied haws, stopped eating like a cute hamster and looked at Xiao Jingyi with puffed cheeks. Go ahead. Haven't you given up on that go-ahead idiom? You've obviously forgotten to say it so many times. Su Shinxing complained. I won't make such a low-level mistake. Emoli pretended not to hear him and continued, go ahead. When the three of them hid in a corner and secretly discussed what to do next, the season changed again. The weather gradually became colder. Just like the fast-forward often used in popular science programs, the leaves of the maple trees by the roadside suddenly became fiery red. From afar it looked like a flame dancing in the autumn wind. But other than that, the surrounding scenery didn't change much. From this point, it was certain that at least in terms of years, not much time had passed. Wait, where are those two people? Xiao Jingyi, who used to be a criminal police officer and tracked criminals, immediately realized that they seemed to have lost their targets. You can't expect them to still be in the same place after a year. I think they might have returned to the Earth Temple. Su Shinxing guessed. The reason why this didn't happen before was probably because after more than 100 years, they just happened to pass by the same place again. Emoli, whose mouth was stuffed with candied haws, also made an incomprehensible sound. Su Shinxing felt that she should be agreeing with his guess. In other words, we have to first determine where the mountain behind Jiangjin University is, Xiao Jingyi said helplessly. This was because the ancient Jiangjin County was different from the modern Jiangjin County. Not only was it much smaller, even the streets were very different. The modern Jiangjin County might have been a forest or a ravine in this era. To be honest, it was not easy to find the address of Jiangjin University in this era. No, the local shrines in this era are also different from those in the modern era. Su Shinxing shook his head. Hearing him say this, Xiao Jingyi came back to his senses and remembered that the earth god Loli seemed to have mentioned something about this not long ago in the cannibal case. In other words, he looked at Su Shinxing with uncertainty. Su Shinxing nodded and replied, just find an abandoned hotel, or a local temple in this era. Xiao Jingyi showed a look of understanding. Although it was difficult to find a local temple in a county, at least they had a clue. If they thought about it carefully, they could actually ask a passerby for directions. Also, about asking a passerby for directions, I think it's better not to do it as much as possible. At this time Su Shinxing suddenly added. Why? Xiao Jingyi, who originally thought that he had already won, immediately asked in dissatisfaction. Because this is the Earth God's dream. Although it seems unrelated at first glance, in fact, everything is connected to the Earth God's mind. It may be fine if you ask a passerby some irrelevant questions, but if you ask where is the local temple? Questions like who is the Earth God? Are likely to attract the other party's attention and subconsciously exclude us. Su Shinxing continued to explain. In this way we can only search slowly and inefficiently. Hearing this, Xiao Jingyi was at his wit's end. After all, it was his first time entering someone else's dream. To be honest, Xiao Jingyi still had some doubts about whether this was someone else's dream. It was better to listen to Su Shinxing, who looked like an expert. Anyway, he couldn't beat him. At this time, Emoli tugged at the corner of Su Shinxing's clothes. What's wrong? You can't rub the candy in your hand on my clothes, okay? Su Shinxing turned around and asked curiously. Emoli continued to make an ambiguous sound. What? Who's coming? Su Shinxing looked in the direction Emoli said. Or is it someone different from the ordinary people in this dream? Su Shinxing was even more curious. How do you communicate? Xiao Jingyi continued to complain. Through love. Su Shinxing gave him a thumbs up. Xiao Jingyi didn't even have the energy to complain. Just as the three of them were still talking, something came from the other side of the street. It's the guard of honor. I've seen it on TV before. Xiao Jingyi said in a low voice without any respect. It's probably some high-ranking official. At the same time, many soldiers had already arrived. They would drive away the irrelevant people on the road and maintain the basic order of the street, which was called Jingdao. Then came the eunuchs who were calling out the names and people who were playing gongs, drums and colorful flowers. These people who looked happy were called Xianyi. From the eunuchs who were calling out the names, they knew that this parade was indeed the guard of honor. Moreover, it was the guard of honor of this dynasty's top scholar. After Jingdao and Xianyi passed by, the person riding a tall horse was the top scholar. However, when Su Shenxing and Xiao Jingyi saw him, they couldn't help but be surprised. Although his face had matured a lot, there was no doubt that his face was the scholar who had been beaten up in front of the rouge shop. Things are really unpredictable. After holding it in for a long time, Xiao Jingyi squeezed out half a sentence. Su Shenxing, on the other hand, frowned. He remembered the story about the former earth god that Qin Xingyan had told him from the ancient books. No matter how he looked at it, the scholar who became the top scholar was very likely to be the one who abandoned the former earth god. In that case, could it be that the knot in Zhui Yuni's heart was that she couldn't stop the former earth god from falling in love with this scholar, which led to the latter's tragic ending? He told Xiao Jingyi his guess, and Xiao Jingyi immediately understood. When Qin Xingyan was telling this story, the policeman was also at Ying apartment, so he knew the cause and effect. I just asked the passers-by next to me, and they said that the top scholar's first stop was to go to the Earth Temple. Do you think this is just a coincidence? While Su Shenxing was in a daze, Xiao Jingyi seemed to have gotten along with the surrounding NPCs and obtained a lot of information. As expected of an auxiliary police officer, Su Shenxing couldn't help but sigh. He's a criminal police officer. Xiao Jingyi corrected him unhappily. Although I'm not too sure, it's very likely that they have secretly colluded with each other. Su Shenxing pondered for a moment. No matter what, this is an opportunity for us to follow him and find the Earth Temple. Thus, the three of them quietly followed the top scholar's guard of honor and followed them to the Earth Temple. In order not to arouse the suspicion of the Jingdao soldiers, they even deliberately chose to walk in small alleys with fewer people. After following them for a while, just as they were about to reach the Earth Temple, Su Shenxing's eyes suddenly turned cold. He reached out and pressed Xiao Jingyi's head down, causing the latter to involuntarily bend down. Almost at the same time, a small black shadow behind them had already kicked over, but because of Su Shenxing's actions, the kick missed. *CK, what happened? Xiao Jingyi naturally felt as if something had flown over his head and couldn't help but exclaim. With the force of the flying object, if Su Shenxing hadn't pressed him down, his head would have exploded like a watermelon. However, when he saw the true face of the object, he couldn't help but be stunned. The other party was none other than the purpose of their trip, the current earth god Loli of Jiangjin. Suddenly, the four of them fell silent. In the end, it was Su Shenxing who spoke first. May I know why this young lady attacked us? It seemed that old Su was planning to pretend not to know her. Xiao Jingyi thought to himself. Shouldn't she be the one asking you this question? The girl's face didn't look relaxed at all and was still tense. If I remember correctly, this should be the third time we've met. Su Shenxing didn't reply. Even if they were careful not to expose themselves, they were still discovered by the other party. However, this couldn't be helped. After all, the three of them were dressed very differently from the people of this era, so it was normal for them to be noticed. Even so, isn't it a bit too much to use such a fatal force right from the start? Xiao Jingyi, who had almost turned into a watermelon, said angrily. Perhaps for ordinary people. The earth god Loli didn't deny this point. I'm an ordinary person. Xiao Jingyi continued to say unhappily. Then may I ask, Mr. Ordinary Person, how did you manage to not change your appearance at all after 100 years? However, Zhui Yuni's words directly made Xiao Jingyi swallow his complaints back into his stomach. In essence, Xiao Jingyi was indeed an ordinary person. At most, because of old Su's protection and bathing in a large amount of spiritual energy, his body was stronger and more durable than ordinary people's. It had only been half a day since he came to this dream, and most of the time was used to follow the top scorer, so of course his appearance couldn't have changed at all. However, for Zhui Yuni, this reason didn't make sense because in the girl's worldview, it had been 100 years since the first time she saw the three of them. This basically counts as a failure, right? Xiao Jingyi whispered to Su Shenxing. No, at this time it's time to execute Plan B. Su Shenxing smiled slightly and said confidently, Don't worry, I'm very good at Plan B. When did you make Plan B? A minute ago. Then let me ask, what is Plan B? In short, beat the other party up and then explain. I knew it. Ah. Zhui Yuni probably mistook Xiao Jingyi's sorrowful cry as the precursor to an attack, so the little girl jumped directly onto the wall by the side of the alley and looked down at them from above. I don't know why you repeatedly spied on the Earth God, But no matter what you want to do, everything ends here. As soon as her voice fell, she put her palms together and shouted loudly. In an instant, Su Shenxing and the others felt that there was nothing under their feet, and the three of them directly fell into a big pit on the ground that they didn't know when it appeared. However, Su Shenxing didn't panic at all. He held Xiao Jingyi in one hand and Emily in the other. "Oli, let's go." "Oh." Emily also raised his hands high and made a gesture of "I'm going to fly." The next moment, the three of them were buried alive by the overwhelming amount of mud. Standing on the wall, Zhui Yuni breathed a sigh of relief. "Although I don't know what kind of demons you are, I definitely won't let you hurt a single hair on the eldest Mississippi." She turned around. Just as she was about to leave, the ground began to tremble slightly. Zhuxiangzhu sat in the Earth God Temple and felt a little bored. Jiangjin was a very peaceful place, and there were almost no demons that would come here to cause trouble. The Earth God's job had already been completed. Even Xiao Yi had run off to who knows where. There wasn't even anyone to talk to in the huge Earth God Temple. The Earth God wasn't interested at all. At this moment, a bell in the room suddenly shook, making a clear and melodious sound. The other end of the bell was tied to the human world. It was the contact method that Zhuxiangzhu had left for the scholar. After getting to know each other outside the rouge shop, she had met the scholar a few more times. As she admired his character, she left him a method to contact her. However, if she remembered correctly, the scholar should have already gone to the capital to take the exam. Regardless, Zhuxiangzhu still decided to go up and take a look. Thus, she transformed into an ordinary human girl and left the Earth God Temple. She directly entered the Earth God Temple in the human world. To prevent ordinary people from seeing her, she entered from the backyard. When she entered the temple, she saw a young man wearing an official's robe kneeling in front of her statue and praying. By the way, although the statue did belong to Zhuxiangzhu, and the incense that the statue enjoyed were all fed back to Zhuxiangzhu, the clay statue could be considered as the work of the human imagination of this era. It looked burly, had a green face and long fangs, and looked like a mountain chief. "Scholar?" the young girl softly called out. The young man on the praying mat raised his head. When he saw the young girl, he couldn't help but smile. "Miss, I've kept my promise and returned." His smile was as sincere as ever. His goes, "You passed the high scholar examination?" The young girl was a little surprised. She didn't expect this blockhead to actually pass the high scholar examination. "Yes, I'm also this year's top scholar." The scholar nodded foolishly. "Then I'll congratulate you. I've heard of the story of the top scholar examination. Didn't the officials of the imperial court come to capture a promising top scholar like you as their son-in-law?" The young girl, who wasn't very good at this, racked her brains to find a topic to congratulate the scholar. "Yes, I'm indebted to the elders for thinking so highly of me. They did do that, but I rejected them all." The scholar continued to smile foolishly. "I told them that I already have someone in my heart." "Oh? Which family's girl is so lucky?" the young girl asked casually. However, the scholar only scratched the back of his head embarrassedly and didn't answer. Zhuxiangzhu only thought that the scholar was too embarrassed to tell an outsider like her, so she didn't pursue the matter. "Oh right, that jade hairpin." The scholar seemed to have thought of something and said, "Don't worry, I've kept it safe for you." Zhuxiangzhu pretended to take it out of her clothes, but in reality she used a spell to transfer the hairpin directly into her hand. Then she reached out to the scholar. "Here, I'll return it to you like I said before." However, the scholar shook his head and didn't take it. Su Shenxing didn't care about Xiao Jingyi's ridicule and instead ordered Mo Li, who was spitting out the dirt in his mouth. "Oh," Mo Li raised his small hand in response. "Wait, what are you trying to do, demon?" The Earth God Loli immediately panicked when she heard this. Like a salted fish, she twisted her body and struggled. However, no matter how she struggled, she couldn't escape from Mo Li and Su Shenxing's imprisonment. The scene of the two Lolas twisting together was quite pleasing to the eye. Perhaps everyone had the same feeling. Compared to a motionless doll, hugging a kitten or puppy that would occasionally move was more interesting. Based on this principle, the Earth God Loli's struggle not only had no effect, but it also made Su Shenxing even more excited. "Kikik, it's useless. Even if you scream yourself hoarse, no one will come to save you." "Oh no, wait for me." Xiao Jingyi shouted, "If you have sex with a girl under the age of 14, It's considered rape regardless of whether the other party is willing or not. I can't sit by and watch my friend become a rapist. Rape your head. I just want to spank her butt. What are you thinking? Su Shenxing looked at Xiao Jingyi with disdain. A dirty. Mo Li, who had run to Su Shenxing's side at some point, stared at Xiao Jingyi with a disdainful expression. Speak. Damn it. I've been played again. Xiao Jingyi was instantly speechless. However, compared to the others, there was one who was even more unlucky. Wait, you definitely can't spank her butt. Quickly stop, otherwise she'll definitely let the big miss teach you a lesson. Don't worry. Su Shenxing comforted him. It's good that you know to be afraid. I'll control my strength until you can still sit on the chair. Our hero said with a pleasant countenance. Chapter 371. After running out of the temple and calming down for a while, Xue Xiangju's brain finally started working again. Although the sudden marriage proposal from the mortal scholar had a huge impact on her, Xue Xiangju's thoughts were still focused on her duties as the earth god. Therefore she quickly focused her attention on the strange earthquake earlier. She had been the earth god of Jiangjin for thousands of years. Before this, there had never been an earthquake in Jiangjin. Furthermore, earthquakes were one of the duties of the earth god. If there really was an earthquake, the city god of Jiangxi should have notified her. Since natural earthquakes were ruled out, there was only one possibility: an earthquake caused by the day after tomorrow. There were no powerful monsters around Jiangjin. Other than Xue Xiangju herself and the mountain deity on the mountain in the north, there was only his little handmaiden left who could trigger the earth elephant with their own strength. Speaking of which, Yi seems to have disappeared since a while ago. Where did that lass run off to? Xue Xiangju revealed a worried expression. After all, her little maid had always been obedient and sensible. If she was the one who caused the earthquake, it was very likely that she had encountered a situation where she had no choice but to do so. This situation was most likely not a good thing. When she thought of this, she looked around and saw that there was no one around. Then she simply used Earth Meld and headed towards the location of the earthquake. Although Su Shenxing said that he would ruthlessly beat up the earth god Loli, he did not do it in the end. He only wanted to scare her. After all, they were friends in the real world. If he did such a thing, wouldn't it be awkward when they meet in the future? Therefore, he simply lifted the girl's collar and said to her, "Forget it, I'm not the kind of person who likes to bully children. However, since you're the maid of the earth god, you should know how to get to the earth god temple, right?" The language of the Celestial Empire was broad and profound. If the same sentence was understood in a different way, it could easily have different meanings. This was the current situation. Su Shenxing simply wanted the girl to tell him which direction to go to find the earth god temple. However, to the earth god Loli, it sounded like he was asking her how to bypass the boundary between humans and gods and enter the earth god temple. As the earth god's fake kingdom, the earth god temple was his strongest fortress and battlefield. At the same time, it was also his weakest home and weakness. If demons with ulterior motives could sneak into the earth god's temple while he was unprepared, not to mention stealing other gods' unique items, just the absorption and tampering of the spiritual veins was enough to cause a disturbance. "Bah, I won't tell you," the earth god Loli replied rather stubbornly. "Then I'll have to use slightly more cruel methods." "Oh, Su Shenxing." "Oh." Jasmine enthusiastically responded to Su Shenxing's call. "What are you going to do?" Xiao Jingyi raised his hand and asked curiously. "Nonsense, of course I'm going to scratch an itch." While speaking, Su Shenxing had already taken off the girl's shoes. He pinched the girl's ankle with one hand and used a brush that Emoli had taken out of nowhere to gently scratch the girl's foot. The girl couldn't hold it in any longer and started laughing maniacally. At the same time, her other free leg kept kicking Su Shenxing. However, because she was out of breath from laughing, she didn't use much strength. For Su Shenxing, it wasn't even enough to deal damage to him. On the other hand, the girl felt like she was kicking a steel plate and it hurt faintly. Hearing the girl's breathless laughter, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but shake his head and silently curse. "Pervert. Oh, you're still not confessing? Emoli, come and help." Su Shenxing seemed to be enjoying himself and even asked Emoli to help him scratch an itch. After Emoli joined the battle, Earth Goddess Loli's laughter became even louder and even tears came out of her eyes. If it weren't for the fact that she had become a god's servant and her body was far stronger than ordinary people's, she might have already fainted from lack of oxygen. Seeing the girl's miserable state, Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but shake his head again and silently say, "Beast." Su Xinxing naturally didn't know that someone was slandering him in his mind. The torture lasted for about 5 minutes. Even though her body was much stronger than ordinary people in the end, because she couldn't catch her breath from laughing, Earth Goddess Loli still fainted. I accidentally overdid it." Su Xinxing went over to check on the girl's condition. After confirming that she had really lost consciousness, he couldn't help but reflect on himself without any regret. Right at this moment the ground rippled like water, and then a figure suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The person who came was the former Earth Goddess Zhuo Xiangzhu. After she arrived, the first thing she saw when she opened her eyes was Zhui Yuni, whose clothes were disheveled and her forehead was covered in sweat due to the torture of being scratched, and Su Xinxing who was lying on top of the little girl. How could you do such a thing?" Suddenly she imagined a plot of a 200,000-word novel where her little maid was captured by a demon and her resistance was futile. She then angrily shouted at the culprit Su Xinxing, "Xiao Yi is still a child. I think that people can only understand each other if they communicate calmly." Su Xinxing tried to explain, but before he could finish he was coldly interrupted by Zhuo Xiangzhu. "I'm sorry, outsider." She stared at Su Xinxing. Although she was expressionless, anyone could feel that the anger hidden under her calmness was about to burst out. "I'm a god." Su Xinxing was speechless for a moment, then he spread out his hands as if he had given up on himself. "So, there's no room for discussion?" The girl used her actions to prove this point. She stretched out her hand towards Su Xinxing and the rest, and suddenly the entire ground seemed to come alive. The ground where Su Xinxing and the rest were standing was like a giant mouth of some kind of creature. It suddenly opened and something like a tongue stretched out from inside and rolled them down. Accompanied by Xiao Jingyi's screams of "What the hell? It's here again." After they fell down, the huge mouth of the earth closed again. "Due to the rules of heaven, I won't kill you immediately. However, after the heavenly court finds out who you really are, I'll punish you according to the rules of heaven." The girl snorted and raised her hand. Like the sunset clouds, her flowing sleeves rolled up the unconscious Zhui Yuni on the ground. Then she turned around and planned to leave. However, the next moment, the voice of the man who should have disappeared came from behind her. "Originally, I didn't want to come into contact with the plot so quickly, but I can't care so much now. Lord Earth God, I have something to ask you. I wonder if you have time to have a cup of tea with me?" Chapter 372. Nope. Zhuo Xiangzhu, who was unperturbed, replied very decisively. She returned Su Xinxing's attack with a move that looked like an earth wave. Su Xinxing stomped on the ground. His whole body was like a sea-stabilizing needle. He forcefully stomped down on the earth's ripples. At this time, Zhuo Xiangzhu entered a state where she could neither advance nor retreat. If she wanted to fight, if she didn't use her full strength, she didn't have the confidence to defeat her opponent. However, if she used her full strength, the entire Jiangjin county might be destroyed. However, it wouldn't be that easy to leave this place. A pervert who could even lay his hands on a little girl like Zhui Yuni might find a chance to ravage all the other little girls in Jiangjin. If Su Xinxing could hear the voice in her heart, he would definitely shout, "Fuck, I'm innocent." Unfortunately, he didn't know how to read minds. Mo Li, who seemed to have this ability, was still expressionlessly eating the pan-fried pork buns in a paper bag. Even Su Xinxing began to wonder when the little girl had gotten her hands on this thing. In short, can't you restrain your hostility a little? Facing the girl's hostility, our protagonist could only helplessly scratch his face. He began to seriously consider whether or not he should imitate the method he used on the earth god Loli and capture her in one move. Then he could slowly concoct her. No, slowly train her. At this time Zhuo Xiangzhu also checked the little girl who fainted. After confirming that she was still a virgin, she realized that she might have made a mistake. Plus, Su Xinxing really didn't have any hostility. She kept a distance from them and asked, "Since that's the case, can you explain why you fought with my maid here? It was your girl who attacked me first. I was just defending myself." Su Xinxing immediately put all the blame on the girl. "Besides, my original purpose was to find you and have a chat with you. Since you're here for me, let's go somewhere else and have a chat. Zhuxiangzhu clapped his hands lightly, and a door appeared on the ground. It seems that some curious mortals have discovered that something is wrong. If we continue to stay here, we might be dragged into something more troublesome. He didn't know where the door led to. It was pitch black and he could only vaguely see a slanted staircase. It seemed to send people deep underground. This was also a test by Zhuxiangzhu. As an earth god, she would undoubtedly have a great advantage in a battle on the ground. In game terms, she had already buffed herself with all her red and blue buffs, and was ready to fight at any moment. On the other hand, her opponent's eyes didn't have a single trace of brilliance in them, as if he didn't care at all. In short, after this entrance appeared, Su Xinxing did not hesitate and directly walked in. Emily followed behind him as usual, blindly following him inside. Wait for me. Xiao Jingyi glanced at Zhuxiangzhu, who was not far away, and quickly ran into the underground entrance to chase after Su Xinxing. After Xiao Jingyi entered, the underground door disappeared. The girl stared at the place where Su Xinxing and the others had entered with some confusion. She felt that she didn't understand Su Xinxing's true purpose anymore. Then the girl gently clapped her hands, and the ground returned to its original state. Even though Jiangjin County wasn't small, the girl was familiar with every city and village in this place, down to every road and every tree. Finally, before the mortals arrived, Zhuxiangzhu also slowly sank into the ground and disappeared. Let's move the camera back to Su Xinxing and the others. They were now walking in an underground tunnel that seemed to have no end. Moreover, from the angle of the tunnel, it seemed that they were gradually going deeper into the ground. Old Su, although you might think that I'm a bit annoying, I'm now even more suspicious of this dream. Xiao Jingyi, who was walking at the back, chattered endlessly. If this is really the dream of the current Earth God, then after you knocked her out in the dream and she lost consciousness in the dream, why did this dream continue to exist? Xiao Jingyi actually still had some evidence that he didn't mention. For example, if this was really a dream, was there a need to be so detailed that even the taste of the food could be restored? From Mo Li's expression of relish, it was impossible to imagine that the food she was eating was all from a dream. But the strange thing was that Su Xinxing, who had been a little suspicious of this just a moment ago, now had an unfathomable expression on his face as he answered seriously. Guess. Do you know that this answer has already been listed as one of the top 10 answers that deserve a beating? Guess again. Guess your ass. Xiao Jingyi felt that if there was a table in front of him, he wouldn't hesitate to flip it over and complain loudly. At this moment, the scene in front of them suddenly opened up. The suddenly bright environment even made Xiao Jingyi lose his ability to see at that moment. They finally walked out of the tunnel. Now they were in an antique living room. Other than the entrance being a tunnel and the fact that there were no windows, it didn't look much different from the living rooms of big houses in antique movies. The owner of the house, Zhuxiangzhu, was already sitting in the main seat waiting for them. Please sit down. Following Zhuxiangzhu's words, the mahogany chairs took a step forward as if they were alive, as if indicating that Su Xinxing and the others should sit down. Su Xinxing was skilled and bold, so he didn't feel that these chairs were creepy and directly chose one to sit down. After hesitating for a moment, Xiao Jingyi sat down next to Su Xinxing. Emily sat down on Su Xinxing's lap. Su Xinxing subconsciously hugged the little girl's slender waist as usual, until the owner of the house cast a piercing look at him, then he awkwardly let go of his hands. I've prepared good root tea for you. It's absolutely impossible to drink this kind of tea in the human world. You can try it. After saying that, Zhuxiangzhu picked up the teacup in his hand, rubbed the lid slightly against the edge of the cup, and drank the tea inside, not knowing whether it was out of etiquette or as a demonstration. Xiao Jingyi looked at the black tea inside as well as the wriggling earthworm-like things in the tea, and finally didn't dare to drink it. Su Xinxing imitated the little girl's actions and then righteously fed the tea to Emily. Pay. In the end, Emily expressionlessly jumped down from Su Xinxing's lap, then found a corner and spat out all the tea. Looking at Su Xinxing's indifferent and calm face, as if nothing had happened, Zhuxiangzhu once again had a new understanding of how thick-skinned the guy he was going to negotiate with later was. Then let's get back to the topic. Foreigners, why did you come to Jiangjin? Didn't you ask me? There's a strange sound coming from my stomach. Do you have juice? Su Shenxing was also puzzled. And if you have a stomachache, it's better not to drink juice. Other than the words really and what, the two sentences have nothing in common. Give me back my trust. He's angry for no reason. Young people these days, why are you pretending to be old? Judging from your ID card, I'm 3 years older than you. He got angry for no reason. Middle-aged people these days, who is this all because of ah. Not far away, Zhuo Xiangzhu looked at Su Shenxing and Xiao Jingyi's bickering. He tilted his head in puzzlement and looked at Mo Li, who had slipped to his side at some point and had begun to steal the fruit plate on the coffee table. Have they always been like this? Jasmine looked at Xiao Jingyi's miserable appearance, which looked like he wanted to cry but had no tears, and nodded her head. Well, to be able to bicker with ordinary people without any scruples, it should be a kind of friendship. Zhuo Xiangzhu's fingers unconsciously twirled around his hair, feeling as if something in his heart had awakened. Well, this feeling, how should I describe it? He's gay. Emily said slowly. Gay. Although I don't know what it means, I don't know why, it seems inexplicably appropriate. During this period of time, Zhuo Xiangzhu and the scholar were very intimate and their relationship had developed further. However, at the same time, this time span allowed Su Shenxing and the rest to discover something unusual. Hey old Su, do you think that the previous earth god's body is getting worse? Even the ordinary Xiao Jingyi could sense that something was wrong. One day he was bored to death as he sat on a wooden chair and asked Su Shenxing. Perhaps only Zhuo Yuni and the scholar who had interacted with the earth god all the time did not clearly sense this. Not only that, according to Mo Li's senses, even her divine power seems to be declining. Su Shenxing nodded. If I'm not wrong, this should be the so-called divine punishment. Divine punishment? What exactly is that? Xiao Jingyi frowned and asked. It's probably a type of curse. Su Shenxing pondered for a moment before he replied. I've seen something similar in Japan, but the divine punishment there is more unreasonable than here. The love between a god and a human, but in the end the punishment is imposed on the human. Don't you and Emily have any ideas? For example, dispel the curse, physics? Xiao Jingyi could not help but continue asking. Unfortunately no. Su Shenxing spread out his hands. If I have to say it, I can follow the cause and effect of the curse and kill the person who placed the curse. Emily is better at cursing than dispelling curses. If that's the case, then the only way is to destroy their love. In the end, Xiao Jingyi could only mutter to himself. At this moment, the door to the earth god's temple opened from the outside. Zhuo Yuni and Emily walked in from outside. Unlike Emily, who walked in leisurely with a basket on his head, one could vaguely see that the basket was full of peaches. Zhuo Yuni's face was full of anxiety. Where's Miss? As soon as she entered, she shouted at Su Shenxing and the others. After all, in theory, Su Shenxing and the others had lived here for half a year. After the misunderstanding at the beginning was resolved, the girl and them were already familiar with each other. Su Shenxing pointed at the bell in the hall. She was called out by that thing again. Why did it have to be now? The girl scratched her hair with both hands, looking even more irritated. What happened? Xiao Jingyi asked curiously. There's no time to explain. The girl shouted. This made Su Shenxing have an inexplicable urge to get in the car, but he resisted with great willpower. Anyway, I'm going to find Mississippi. If anyone else comes here later, try to delay them as much as possible, okay? As she spoke, the girl had already rushed out of the courtyard. What's going on? Xiao Jingyi was dumbfounded. It seems like we've triggered a hidden plot. Su Shenxing had a thoughtful look on his face. A hidden plot. Do you really think this is a game? Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but ridicule. Landlord, help me peel them. Emily was not interested in their conversation. He even stuffed the basket on his head into Su Shenxing's hands. Sure enough, the basket was filled with peaches the size of goose eggs. Is this the time to leisurely peel peaches? Xiao Jingyi felt that he almost didn't have the energy to ridicule these two people. How can a person who can't even peel peaches save the world? Su Shenxing righteously wrestled with the peaches until his hands were full of juice. No, I don't think these two things have anything in common. Just as the two of them began to talk nonsense again, there was a knock on the courtyard door that Zhui Yuni had slammed shut. Su Shenxing looked at Emoli and Emoli looked at Xiao Jingyi. "Hey, I'll go open the door." Xiao Jingyi, who was at the bottom of the food chain, could only bitterly run over to run errands. A dignified man stood outside the courtyard. He was dressed in the luxurious clothes of aristocratic young masters in period dramas. He seemed to be slightly older than Su Shenxing, and had more hair than Su Shenxing. With his handsome appearance, he could easily win over a group of die-hard fans in any modern TV series. He didn't need any acting skills. He was well equipped with both civil and military roles. He only needed to recite 12,345 lines and his fans wouldn't mind. "That you are?" Xiao Jingyi asked doubtfully. The person in front of him didn't look like an ordinary NPC with only 1 or 2 lines. In terms of handsomeness, he was either a supporting character or a major villain. In Su Shenxing's words, this guy was definitely a hidden character. Although he didn't know the other party's identity, there was nothing wrong with being polite. "Didn't Xiangzhu tell you servants?" The other party raised his eyebrows. "I'm the Lishui Dragon King, the god of this land and the fiancé of your master Zhui Xiangzhu." Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but blurt out. The Lishui River was a large river next to Jiangjin in ancient times. It was a tributary of the Yangtze River. However, because of the flood control officials knew that it was better to divert the water rather than block it. Therefore, they simply dug a few ditches to divert the Lishui River away. Finally, it flowed into the East Sea and this river disappeared from the map. Of course, what made Xiao Jingyi confused wasn't the river's problem. It was that the current plot seemed to have become a little strange. At least in the ancient books that Qin Xingyan found, there was no mention of this Lishui Dragon King. Seeing that Xiao Jingyi didn't seem to be able to handle it, Su Shenxing stuffed a half-peeled peach into Mo Li's mouth and quickly walked up to him. "Lishui Dragon King? I've heard a lot about you. You flatter me." The other party raised his nose arrogantly. It seemed that he liked compliments very much. "Although it's a little rude, may I ask if you're the one that was beaten up by Monkey or Neza?" "That's really rude. I've never been beaten up by Monkey or Neza." "Don't tell me you're the one that was ridden by Tang Xing for 19 years. Ride your head. Moreover, he's still an 8th-division heavenly dragon. Show me some respect." "Then you're the one that charged at your temple?" Su Shenxing praised. "Charge your sister. How prejudiced are you against the Dragon King?" The Lishui Dragon King looked like he wanted to skin Su Shenxing alive. Well, if it wasn't for the fact that he was concerned about his fiancé's feelings, he might have already skinned him alive. Probably to the extent that he can't defeat Monkey. Nonsense. Even if the entire heavenly court fought together, how many immortals could defeat Monkey? "No, wait, who the hell are you?" At this point, the Lishui Dragon King was already a little suspicious. Although Xiangzhu departs from the Tao and always travels the secular world as a mortal, she would never hire a guy like you as a steward or servant. "Who the hell are you?" "Good question. We'll have to start from 4.5 billion years ago when Earth was born." "That's too long." "No, what the hell is Earth? Isn't the sky square and the Earth square? That's why you dragons are still the same. No wonder you can't defeat Monkey. You have to learn more to understand the greatness of this world." "Aw, you bastard, you're so annoying. Even if Xiangzhu blames me, I'll kill you." As he spoke, the Lishui Dragon King released his divine power, wanting to directly smash Su Shenxing into a pancake. Su Shenxing was secretly delighted. After all, things like slaying dragons were the norm for protagonists in both the East and the West. But before he could make a move, the scene he saw from the corner of his eye made him twitch his mouth helplessly. He could only suppress his desire to make a move. "All of you stop." In this era, the earth god of Jiangjin, Zhui Xiangzhu, rushed back in the nick of time. "Hey, consider yourself lucky." The Lishui Dragon King, who was completely unaware that he had just walked on the edge of the dragon feast, had to restrain his killing intent and divine power. He returned to his previous elegant appearance and turned back to welcome his fiancée. Chapter 375. Xiangzhu, I've waited for you for 1,000 years. I didn't marry a concubine, drink wine or have sex. Why haven't you made up your mind to marry me? As soon as Zhui Xiangzhu returned, The Li Shui Dragon King threw Su Xinxing aside and surrounded his goddess like an animal in heat, desperately begging for love. Aoli, I've said it before. The engagement was only set up by my father and Dragon King Ao Guang when I wasn't around. I won't admit to that kind of thing. Zhuo Xiangzhu explained with some annoyance. However, as before, the Li Shui Dragon King did not retreat because of this. Instead, he continued to pester them. If you don't listen to your parents' orders and matchmakers' words, what else can you listen to? Could it be free love? What are you unhappy about? I'll make noodles for you to eat. Authentic dragon whisker noodles. Does the earth god have parents? Su Xinxing, who was standing to the side, interrupted in surprise. Nonsense, of course she does. Otherwise, could it be that she jumped out of a stone like a monkey? Don't interrupt the matters between the gods. Before Zhuo Xiangzhu could answer, the Li Shui Dragon King spoke first. He even gave Su Xinxing a threatening look, telling him not to speak casually. Speaking of which, you're actually the son of the dragon that was beaten up by the monkey. Thus, Su Xinxing also diverted the topic to the Li Shui Dragon King as if he had discovered a new continent. Beaten up my head. My father wasn't beaten up by the monkey. It's just that he's kind, so he gave the monkey a piece of scrap metal. The Li Shui Dragon King roared at Su Xinxing shamelessly. Then your brother was beaten up by Neza, right? Su Xinxing saw that there was still hope, so he continued to tease the other party. In fact, he had already considered his words. In fact, Ao Bing was not only beaten up by Neza, but he was also skinned and made into a sex toy. Impudent. This mortal is so annoying. Men, get him out of here. The veins on the Li Shui Dragon King's forehead were throbbing. It seemed that he was furious. With a loud shout, seawater spurted out from the ground. More than a dozen shrimp soldiers and crab generals wearing armor and holding weapons rushed out from the seawater and surrounded Su Xinxing. Good, I want to fight 10 of you. Su Xinxing was delighted to see this. He clapped his hands and made a sound of Ada, striking a nondescript Huang Feihong's signature pose. Aoli. This is my land temple, not your Li Shui Dragon Palace. But at this time Zhuo Xiangzhu raised her eyebrows. With a wave of her right hand, a huge clay man fell from the sky. After landing, it turned into a huge slime. The shrimp soldiers and crab generals could not dodge in time and were all wrapped up by the clay. Then the lump of clay became smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared with a pop sound. Although it looked quite cool, Su Xinxing noticed that the other party's spiritual power flow seemed to have become rusty under Mo Li's reminder. Originally, she could have used a more ingenious spell to throw the shrimp soldiers and crab generals back into the water, but now she had no choice but to use such a big method. Was the heavenly rule's influence becoming more and more intense? If this continued, it might really become a heavenly punishment in the end. Aoli did not know this, so he simply thought that the young girl's actions were the result of her anger. Therefore, the Li Shui Dragon King's expression became even more twisted. Xiangzhu, you're actually going against me for a mere mortal? He grinned, but the kind of grin that revealed terrifying canine teeth that humans would never have. It was obviously not a kind smile. But I'm going to touch this mortal, let's see if you'll fight me for him. As he finished speaking, his body twisted and he turned into an eastern dragon. He soared into the sky and opened his huge mouth to bite Su Xinxing's head. Su Xinxing's eyes lit up and thought to himself, finally, it's time for me to strike. Instantly, he clenched his right fist and waited for the other party to come to a comfortable distance. But at this moment, countless huge clay chains bound Aoli and dragged him to the ground, firmly binding him. Since Mr. Su is staying at the land temple, he is my guest. Aoli, if you can't stand it, then go back to your Li Shui. Zhuo Xiangzhu, who was not at all frightened by the Li Shui Dragon King, said harshly. Xiangzhu, you actually did such a thing. You're siding with an outsider. I'm so angry. The Li Shui Dragon King writhed on the ground like a beanworm, and at the same time he screamed shrilly as if he was being ended. Well, there was nothing wrong with that. Su Xinxing also made an OTZ action and his heart was full of resentment. Can't you just let me punch you? I can blow up this level of trash with one punch. Mo Li sensibly patted Su Xinxing's head to comfort him. Xiao Jingyi, on the other hand, was secretly laughing to the point that he was about to suffer internal injuries. Finally, the Li Shui Dragon King transformed back into a human and broke free from the chains of the land. But at this time his body was full of mud and he looked a little battered and exhausted. Good, you coward hiding behind a woman, just you wait. If you have the guts, don't leave the land temple for the rest of your life. After leaving Su Shinxing with his signature antagonist words, the Li Shui Dragon King turned into a rainbow and flew out of the land temple. Su Shinxing smacked his lips, and only then did he come back to his senses. Did this clown think of him as a love rival? Suddenly he felt like he had been shot while lying down. I'm sorry, Mr. Su. Xue Xiangzhu clearly understood this, and could only smile bitterly and apologize to Su Shinxing. Su Shinxing pretended not to hear and didn't answer the other party. He just picked up Mo Li, who was still eating peaches, and left the living room. Obviously, the other party didn't explain clearly to the Li Shui Dragon King, even though he knew there was a misunderstanding. He wanted to use Su Shinxing as a shield to prevent the Li Shui Dragon King from finding trouble with the real mortal scholar. Although Su Shinxing could understand why the other party did this, it didn't mean that he was willing to take the blame for the other party's lover. Hey, Mrs. talking to you. Why are you acting so arrogant? The Earth Goddess Loli, who hadn't realized what had happened, ran over to Su Shinxing and waved her little fists in protest. Don't be rude. It's my fault this time. She wanted to continue nagging beside Su Shinxing, but she was stopped by the Earth Goddess. This made Zhui Yuni tilt her head in confusion, but in the end she still couldn't figure out the situation. On this day, just as Su Shinxing walked out of the land temple, a man wearing a Sun Wukong mask jumped out from his blind spot. Aha, I finally waited for you, you coward. However, before he could finish his excited words, Su Shinxing punched him in the stomach. He could only hold his stomach and kneel on the ground, losing half of his life. Phew, I feel good. Do you have anything else to say? Su Shinxing wiped his forehead, which wasn't sweating at all, and put on a refreshed expression as he asked the other party in a friendly manner. Who the hell are you? It was obvious that even though Su Shinxing had restrained most of his strength, it was still enough to make this clown who suddenly jumped out suffer. This was also because the dragon race's physical strength was far superior to humans. At the same time, this naturally made the other party understand that Su Shinxing wasn't the ordinary mortal he thought he was. Thus he took in a cold breath and asked, If I have to say, a quarter of the martial god? Su Shinxing replied with uncertainty. You're lying. Even a real martial god's fist wouldn't be that heavy if he didn't use his divine power. So, the dignified Li Shui Dragon King actually hid in a place like this and wanted to sneak up on his love rival. Isn't this too degrading? I don't care what Li Sui Longwo says. Thus, the other party immediately began to act dumb. What kind of weird accent is that? Speaking of which, even if you want to act innocent, you should at least use a transformation technique. Why the hell are you wearing a mask when you're an immortal? Furthermore, it's the mask of the monkey that beat up your father. I wasn't beaten up. I'm tired of this topic. Let's leave it at that. Su Shinxing picked his nose and looked disinterested. Too much. You bastard mortal, you're really annoying. The Li Shui Dragon King was about to cry, but compared to last time, at least he didn't summon shrimp soldiers and crab generals to send Su Shinxing out. Of course, it could also be because this place was already outside. In short, if you're doing this for the sake of that Earth God's favor, then don't waste your effort. The person she likes isn't me. Su Shinxing scratched his face. Of course, I can't tell you who it is for some reason. The Li Shui Dragon King was silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. The small half of his face that was exposed became bitter, and he said in a somewhat helpless tone, I know. In any case, Li Shui is also the source of this generation's water system. Everyone in the world is connected to dragons, and I have eyes wherever there is water. What? You actually peeped at the toilet? That's too dirty. I didn't. Don't casually taint my innocence. I saw that the atmosphere was too heavy, so I livened it up a little to make you happy. Don't mind it. Happy my ass. F*CKU Papa, I can't talk about this anymore. The Li Shui Dragon King took off the monkey mask on his head and threw it to the ground. An honest dragon also has a temper, don't you know that? Sorry, please continue. Su Shinxing said with a smile. F*C, where was I? Peeping at the toilet. Oh, peeping at the toilet, let me tell you, that big white butt. Something's wrong, right? The Li Shui Dragon King, who found that the topic was once again led astray, was about to kneel down. I suddenly found out that Journey to the West was created in the Ming Dynasty. Well, this Earth is not that Earth, and there are subtle changes in history, so don't complain about this kind of trivial matter. Therefore, Su Xinxing began to seriously consider whether he should jump to the heavenly court to see what it was like after listening to the story. Probably misunderstanding the reason for Su Xinxing's silence, the Lishui Dragon King smiled and continued to talk about his past love story. Actually, the story after that wasn't too special. It was just like how many stories would unfold. I met her at a banquet. I don't know the reason why Xiangzhu became a god, but when she became a god she was only 16 years old according to human calculation. Her father was just a mortal who couldn't help at all. It was only because of her that he was able to come to the banquet of the dragon clan and various small gods to eat and drink. What surprised me even more was that she did a very good job as a god of the earth. It was said that the place that was originally just a small fishing village, under her meticulous care, actually had the atmosphere of a county. Furthermore, this vigorous development didn't stop. It continued to slowly and steadily grow. Unlike me, she was a very talented person. However, the circle of the earth gods seemed to be quite exclusive. The girl wasn't accepted by the other earth gods or mountain gods, and could only eat and drink alone in the hall of the palace made of pearls and crystals. At that time, I was also unhappy because my work wasn't going well, so I didn't have the mood to play with the other dragons. Guess what happened in the end? She thought that I was an isolated person like her, so she took the initiative to find me. Actually, at that time I still had some of the pride of a dragon. At first I couldn't let go of the fact that she was originally a human, but as we chatted more, I gradually found that she was different from the greedy and stupid humans I knew. She was intelligent and kind, a very good girl. Thus, we two rookies chatted happily and treated each other as close friends. When I encountered some problems at work, she could easily solve them with a few words. Furthermore, she wasn't arrogant. She was different from the other earth gods whose brains were about to turn to stone. He was a very interesting person. Now that I think about it, perhaps I had already fallen in love with her at that time. Perhaps I was too engrossed in my conversation with her, and my father, the master of the Eastern Sea, mistakenly thought that I had fallen in love with her. Thus, he took the initiative to set up a marriage with the other party's father. What a joke! Her father was actually very happy that she was able to connect with the dragon race, and felt that his side had taken advantage of her. However, I was very clear that I was the one who was climbing up the social ladder, and that I wasn't worthy of her. When I found out about this, I had to say that my heart was filled with joy, and I vowed to become a dragon that was worthy of her. To be honest, if she didn't agree, I wouldn't have forced her to marry me. However, I never thought that she would fall in love with a mortal. After coming out of the Earth Temple that day, I also felt that something was wrong. Her attitude towards you was not like that of a lover, but no different from an ordinary guest. However, she was a little different from before, and that was not wrong. That was why I mobilized the water tribe to help me find clues. In the end, I saw it. She was on a stone bridge in the outskirts, reluctantly sending off that mortal scholar. At this point, the Lishui Dragon King let out a long sigh, and his expression was gloomy. "Human, do you have wine?" "Oh." Su Xinxing shook his head. "Being greedy for things in a cup isn't a good thing, so I don't drink." By the way, the main reason why he didn't drink was because he didn't have the money to buy wine. But didn't you humans say that? Getting drunk solves 1,000 worries. AI, it's a pity that human wine is too weak. I drank an entire wine cellar and still couldn't get drunk. The Lishui Dragon King shook his head and sighed. "Did you pay?" "What's money?" "Then don't drink it all." The owner of the wine cellar was about to cry. To be honest, at that moment I really wanted to set off a huge wave and drown that scholar. Not caring about Su Xinxing's constipated face, the Lishui Dragon King continued. "However, when I saw Xiangzhu's appearance, I knew that not only would I not be able to get her heart back, it would also make her suffer for hundreds of years or even thousands of years." He laid down on the ground in despair, and his expression became that of a good-for-nothing. "I don't want to see her in pain." What is love in this world? It teaches dragons to pledge their lives to each other. Su Xinxing couldn't help but mutter. "Good poem. Just this poem alone is enough for me, Fu Long Xing." The Lishui Dragon King laughed, and his words were filled with bitterness. "Let's go. I know that the owner of the wine cellar secretly dug a new cellar." Let's go and taste the new wine inside and drink it all. That's why I said don't drink it all. Chapter 377. In the end, the Li Shui Dragon King didn't manage to drink the wine. It wasn't that Su Xinxing had a conscience and stopped him, but the other party seemed to have sensed something before that happened. He looked up at the sky that was beginning to fill with dark clouds, and stood there like a statue for a long time before coming back to his senses. Then he said that he would treat Su Xinxing to a drink next time when he was free, and just like that he turned into a cloud of mist and disappeared. Su Xinxing wasn't obsessed with things like alcohol. If he had to say, he liked drinking cola more than alcohol. After walking around the Jiangjin of this era and finding nothing special, Su Xinxing returned to the Temple of the Earth. After that, the sky began to drizzle. The rain that he thought would stop soon lasted unexpectedly long, and Su Xinxing didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but he felt that the rain seemed to be getting heavier. Wow, it's actually raining in a dream. This isn't a fantasy at all. Xiao Jingyi, who also went out to search but found nothing, also complained, I don't have any clothes to change into. Su Xinxing, who was leaning on the bed and looking at the rain, turned his head and said to Xiao Jingyi, speaking of which, there's a way to verify whether this world is a dream or not. I clearly asked you several times before, but you didn't give me any details, and now you're taking the initiative to tell me? Xiao Jingyi's face was full of suspicion. Actually, as long as you change into clothes from this era's tailor shop, when you go back if you still have clothes on, it means that this isn't a dream, but a parallel world or the real past. If you're caught by your colleagues because you're naked, it means that this place is really just a dream. What do you think? Su Xinxing didn't directly answer the other party's doubts, but said in a serious manner. Sure enough, it's this kind of fraudulent method again. Why don't you change into it yourself? Because I might become naked. Su Xinxing's expression said, what kind of stupid thing are you saying? Isn't that natural? Since that might happen, don't let me do it. On the other hand, Emily seemed to have used the opportunity of patrolling today to visit all the Jiangjin food stalls of this era. Now she ignored the two men who were talking like they were doing a crosstalk and was hiding in a corner by herself, eating green dumplings, a type of snack made from glutinous rice and bean paste. Because it was mixed with green mugwort juice, it was green in color, hence the name green dumplings, with relish. Just as the three of them were minding their own business, a feeling that was as turbid as muddy water and as sticky as paste assaulted their hearts. Emily, who was originally eating a green ball, made a small bite mark on the table with a crunch. Because this was not the first time he had experienced this situation, Su Xinxing immediately realized that the timeline might have changed like the previous few times. Compared to the first time when it changed without any feeling, the current situation was obviously much more serious. It was very likely that this world dream realm had already begun to reject the three of them. Where's my snack? Emily chewed a few times, swallowed the food in her mouth, tilted her head and asked puzzledly, what do you mean? It should have been eaten by you a few days ago. Su Xinxing shrugged and replied. Thanks to the habit of recording on the wall calendar every day in order to cope with this situation, he was still able to know the current date through the wall calendar. Nearly 10 days have passed. The time jump this time isn't that big. Xiao Jingyi carefully read the wall calendar and couldn't help but mutter. Compared to this, I'm more worried about the situation outside. Su Xinxing frowned slightly and looked out the window. The rain outside was still almost the same as before. But if you looked carefully you could still see some differences. For example, about an inch of rainwater had accumulated in the yard, and the plants in the yard had been drowned. However, the two little goldfish in the pond were swimming happily, exploring places they had never been before. If it had been raining non-stop for nearly 10 days, there might have been some unfavorable situations. Xiao Jingyi obviously also thought of this. He laughed dryly and said, we shouldn't be that unlucky, right? Now the season here is summer, so it's normal for us to encounter so much rain, right? However, at this moment, the door of their yard was rudely knocked open from the outside. You two freeloaders. I have something for you to do. The person who came was the future Earth god Zhuiyuni. She arrogantly shouted at Su Xinxing and Xiao Jingyi. But before she finished speaking, Su Xinxing skillfully grabbed her head with his dragon claw and used a little force. Suddenly, the little girl's words became a sorrowful cry. Ouch, 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 a mere demon dares to treat a god's servant like this. Don't think I'll let this go. Oh, the things in my head are about to burst out. I admit defeat. I'm wrong. I don't dare anymore, let go of me. Seeing that she was so tactful, Su Shenxing also let go of his hand. The little girl's eyes were filled with tears. She covered her head and cried out in pain. So, did you come here just to be funny? Only then did Su Shenxing calmly ask the other party. Hearing his question, the little girl's expression changed. Oh right, quickly go to the Lishui Dam with me. Lishui Dam? Su Shenxing's expression became slightly more serious. Days of rain, Lishui Dam. It was obvious what these two words meant. Are you kidding? Xiao Jingyi was also stunned. Lishui Dam is about to burst. I'm afraid it's more serious than that. Anyway, Miss has already gone there. You should hurry up and come with her. Speaking of this, the girl bit her lower lip and then said seriously, in addition, if Miss makes any decisions that may hurt herself, please stop her. It doesn't matter even if you forcefully bring her back. Anyway, the Earth Temple is not in the human world. Even if it really becomes a flood outside, it can provide a minimum degree of living inside. Oh? Even if she hates it, it doesn't matter? Su Shenxing was a little surprised. He always thought that the Earth God Loli would unconditionally agree with all the decisions of the former Earth God. It doesn't matter. Miss has already become too thin recently because of various things. If she continues to be so stubborn, she will definitely not be able to hold on. Instead of waiting for her to fall, it's better to let her rest a little. The little girl was not confused at all. She bowed to Su Shenxing. As long as she can give it, no matter what the reward is, it doesn't matter. Please be sure to help her and tell her not to do anything stupid. Since you have said so, Su Shenxing raised his eyebrows and smiled slightly. Then let's go and take a look. After all, according to normal circumstances, the plot that they had waited for so long seemed to finally reach a turning point. Chapter 378. After walking out of the Earth Temple, the drizzling rain suddenly became a lot heavier. Even if it wasn't a downpour, it had already reached the level of a heavy downpour. Su Shenxing propped up the cloud scale to block the rain outside, and at the same time he looked at the sky with a feeling in his heart. If he punched it this time, the sky might clear up. But it was more likely that he would break this dream and cause the Earth God Loli to sleep forever. Sure enough, it was better to hurry to the place where the plot could be triggered. It's too late to run now. Zhui Yuni, who was completely unaware of Su Shenxing's dangerous thoughts, said loudly. She looked at Su Shenxing and the others, especially Xiao Jingyi, who looked the most like an ordinary person in terms of behavior. Stand firm, I'm going to speed up a little. So Su Shenxing gave up the idea of using the ordinary high-speed train and just stood on the ground, intending to see how the girl would speed up. Zhui Yuni ignored the mud and directly pressed her hands on the ground, and the ground they were standing on bulged a little. Then, as if sitting on a conveyor belt, the ground carried Su Shenxing and the others and sped up on the empty street because of the heavy rain. Not long after, they arrived at the destination of this trip, the Lishui Dam. There was no concrete in this era, and the dam was only made with the simplest material, which was a pile of earth and stone. If it was in the past, this kind of dam would be enough, but it was obviously not the case now. Behind the dam, the surging waves of the Lishui River were crashing against the earth dam. Facing the mighty Lishui River, the simple dam looked like it was on the verge of collapse. In fact, if it wasn't for the Earth God standing on the dam and using his own divine power to prevent the mud from being washed away by the water, the dam probably wouldn't have been able to hold on until now and would have collapsed a few days ago. Miss. After rushing here, Zhui Yuni forgot about Su Shenxing and the others. In her eyes, there was only a delicate figure standing on the dam, whose body didn't sway at all in the storm. That was the Earth God of Jiangjin, Zhui Xiangzhu. At this time she no longer looked like a fairy. Her whole body was drenched as if she had just climbed out of the water. Her hair was also stuck to her forehead in clumps. She was in a very sorry state. But for some reason, the back of such a disheveled young lady, when she faced the storm alone, inexplicably gave people the illusion of being incomparably tall and sturdy. Didn't I already tell you to take refuge? Seeing Zhui Yuni appear, there was some joy in the girl's eyes, but it was more of a reproach. It's too dangerous here. Even if you're my servant, you're not a god of the establishment. If you're swept away by the waves, your life will be in danger. But to leave eldest miss here alone, I can't do anything. Although the little girl shrank her neck when she was scolded, she still stubbornly retorted in the end. Eldest miss, I also know that compared to me, you prefer that human male. At times like this you definitely hope that he can be by your side. It doesn't matter if he's just a substitute. As long as you're happy, it doesn't matter if you treat me as him. I can also carry mud and rocks, strengthen the dam and so on. I can also do manual labor or chores. As long as I can do it, I can do anything. The little girl hugged the earth goddess and cried her eyes out. However, because the bean-sized raindrops fell on the two of them, it was hard to tell whether it was rainwater or tears on her face. But please don't chase me away, because I want to be with you, milady. Su Shinxing didn't know if it was an illusion or if even God was moved by the girl's sincerity, but the pouring rain seemed to have become a lot lighter all of a sudden. After smashing the waves that were enough to drown the entire dam with a punch, Su Shinxing turned around and looked at the master and servant who were still hugging each other. For some reason, although their ages and appearances were different, the two of them reminded Su Shinxing of Chihaya Fukuyama and Asahi Sakura Kanji back at home. Landlord, Mo Lee, who swallowed a shrimp that was washed up the dam, suddenly looked up and whispered to Su Shinxing, "There are a lot of things coming this way. Tell me." "What do you mean by a lot of things?" Xiao Jingyi, who was completely drenched because he couldn't rub against Su Shinxing's cloud scales, paled. "Can't be a lot of waves, right?" Just a moment ago Xiao Jingyi was still happy that the dam didn't burst. However, when Su Shinxing dragged him to the dam and saw the magnificent scene that was comparable to the Qiantang River in textbooks, Xiao Jingyi began to calculate in his mind how dangerous it would be if he was swept away by waves of this magnitude. In the end, he came to the conclusion that his survival rate was probably not much higher than winning the lottery. That was why he reacted so strongly when he heard Mo Lee's words. "It would be great if it really was that kind of thing," Su Shinxing said softly from the side. "It's worse than that." "Then what is it? Is it a huge wave mixed with trees and rocks? The kind where I'll definitely die if I fall?" Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but feel even more nervous. Because of the high tide, standing on the dam and looking in the direction of the Li River gave people a feeling that it was as boundless as the sea. At this time, on the other side of the sea, a white wall seemed to have appeared. The wall was gradually approaching, and the closer it got, the bigger the wall became. Even though they were still nearly a kilometer away from the dam, they could already feel how terrifying the wall was. That's right, it was a super huge wave that was more than 20 meters tall. Even Su Shinxing and the others could already feel the buzzing sound in the air and the trembling of the earth. Just from this point alone they could tell how terrifying the power of the waves was. Even with the protection of the earth god, this dam made of mud and rocks definitely wouldn't be able to withstand the impact of such a huge wave. Just like how a wall made of corrugated paper couldn't withstand a real battering ram, it would probably be completely destroyed by the huge wave in an instant. And that huge wave could wrap around countless rocks and trees, and with the remaining momentum, destroy half of Jiangjin County. Chapter 379. Just as Su Shinxing was about to use his fist to counteract the terrifying wave, Mo Lee pulled on the corner of Su Shinxing's clothes. "What's wrong?" Su Shinxing turned his head and asked the little girl. The little girl didn't answer and only shook her head. Although she had Su Shinxing's cloud scales, her blonde hair was still wet from the rain, and her double ponytails looked a bit dispirited. Seeing her like this, Su Shinxing didn't continue to ask for the reason, and only put down his fist. Seeing that the wave was about to sweep over, Xiao Jingyi hid behind Su Shinxing and the others. However, the master and servant of the earth god didn't show any feelings of fear. Instead, like Su Shinxing, they stood in front and faced the monstrous power with their weak bodies. Miraculously, the terrifying wave didn't actually hit the dam. It stopped a few meters in front of the dam in a way that could make Newton come back to life. Then many black shadows appeared in the huge wave, and in the center, facing Zhuxiangzhu, a figure broke out of the water and looked at the girl of the earth god of Jiangjin. "I thought that this kind of wave would at least make you a bit wiser." The Lishui Dragon King stared at Zhuxiangzhu expressionlessly. "When I think about the whole of Jiangjin behind me, I can't retreat." The girl with a pale face smiled and replied, "Aoli, stop the flood. The degree of destruction is enough, isn't it?" Do you think I caused the flood just for fun? This is the arrangement of the heavens. On the 11th day of the flood catastrophe, Jiangjin will be flooded. Everything is destined by the heavens. The Lishui Dragon King didn't listen to the girl's words, and instead said sternly, "But do you know how many people will be displaced? How many families would be broken up and killed? They are my people, I won't just watch this happen." The girl retorted without any fear. "They are the people of the human emperor, not yours. I've already given you enough time. Because I didn't set a date for Jiangjin to be submerged, I broke the dam on the last day. When the tide recedes tomorrow, humans can still return to their homes. Not only that, the fields will become more fertile because of the fertile soil brought by the flood, making their lives better in the future." What's wrong with that? The Lishui Dragon King probably didn't want to quarrel with the girl, and tried his best to make his voice calm. But even so, Su Shenxing could hear the anger in his words. "I've already done so much for you, why don't you appreciate it? And the chaos after the flood, the people will not be able to clean those corpses. And the chaos after the flood to the end, it too. Zhuo Xiangzhu tried her best to argue for the people of Jiangjin. "Don't push your luck. The heavens' rules are the heavens' rules," the Lishui Dragon King roared. The love that had been brewing for thousands of years finally turned into a mouthful of bitter wine, which made people sigh. Found it. It was obviously an extremely urgent moment, but Su Shenxing revealed a slight smile at this time. This should be the turning point of the entire plot. If they followed the direction of the previous Earth God Loli's memory, then the Lishui Dragon King would most likely die in the hands of Zhuo Xiangzhu by letting go of the river and committing suicide. After all, Zhuo Xiangzhu, whose cultivation had been greatly damaged due to the divine punishment, was definitely not a match for the great Long Jun. It was precisely because of the death of the Long Jun that it was so easy to change the course of the Lishui River in the future, because that big river no longer had the Long Jun to oversee it. As the saying goes, the water is not deep, but the water is spiritual if there is a dragon. Without a dragon, no matter how deep the water was, it was just a pool of stagnant water without spirit. Since they understood the key to the whole matter, the only thing left was to figure out how to change this plot without destroying the entire dreamscape. Chapter 380. If this goes on. Seeing the black dragon rolling up a huge wave and flying towards Zhuo Xiangzhu, who was shielding her behind, Earth God Loli had an anxious look in her eyes. An ominous feeling seemed to have condensed into solid black mud in her chest. She seemed to have seen everything that would happen in the end. Everything that would cause her extreme pain and regret for the rest of her life. The battle between the Dragon King and the Earth Goddess was particularly intense, because this was a battle that they were upholding their beliefs. In the end, Zhuo Xiangzhu, who was at a disadvantage, would use the last of her strength to condense a long sword with her heart's blood. She wanted to stab the Lishui Dragon King and force him to retreat. However, the Lishui Dragon King, who was originally cowardly and afraid of death, would not only not dodge, but would also use his own chest to welcome the sword. The long sword made of divine blood pierced the Dragon King's heart. Bright red dragon blood with a hint of gold splashed out, even splashing onto the girl's face. At this moment, the Dragon King turned back into his human form. However, his soul aperture was pierced and his vitality was cut off. He did not even have the strength to stand and could only collapse into the arms of the Earth Goddess. The rain finally stopped. It was as if someone had pierced a small hole in the thick, gloomy clouds that filled the sky. The only ray of sunlight shone through the hole onto the two of them. Even Zhui Yuni, who was close by, was still shrouded in shadows. It was as if even the heavens were mourning the death of the Lishui Dragon King. Even though it was already difficult for him to open his eyes, the Lishui Dragon King still tried to speak in his usual frivolous tone. As expected, "I can't really do anything to you in the end, Aoli." Zhuo Xiangzhu's expression was somewhat complicated. It was a mixture of guilt, sadness and pain, but there was also a trace of relief. "Really? Cough, I've been chasing you for 1,000 years. Can't you be a little gentler?" The blood that the Dragon King coughed out spilled onto the girl's white dress. It was a ghastly sight. "I'm sorry." As expected, only an apology? I remember more than 100 years ago when I proposed marriage to you, you also rejected me like this. Zhuo Xiangzhu was silent. He just hugged Aoli quietly. After I die, the flood won't disappear immediately. Instead, it will become even more ferocious for a short period of time due to the lack of restrictions. Cough, but it's fine. I've already thought of a solution for you. Aoli, who didn't expect to get an answer from the girl, said softly, after I die, I will return to my dragon body. If you chop off my head and block the eye of the Li River, you can stop the water from rising. If you peel off my skin and make it into a banner and stick it on the bank of the Li River, you can change the direction of the wind and let the water flow gradually stop. If you throw my dragon pearl into the Li River, you can suppress the water tribes and the great river won't riot because it lost its master. At this point, Aoli coughed even more violently. More dragon blood spilled onto the girl's body because of his actions, causing the girl's long dress to turn bright red with a hint of gold. Aoli. Zhuo Xiangzhu lowered his head and murmured softly, why are you so stupid? I'm not worth it. Whether it's worth it or not depends on me. Even with the vitality of the dragon race, Aoli seemed to be unable to hold on after suffering such a heavy injury. He closed his eyes and softly spoke as if he was talking to himself. Don't worry, the dragon blood can protect you to the greatest extent. Even if I go against the laws of heaven, my dragon blood can at least ensure that you don't die. After a few breaths of silence, he slowly raised his head. Even though his eyes were closed, he could vaguely see the girl from 1,000 years ago who had extended her hand to him so that he could enjoy the banquet together. Thus he also used all his strength and raised his hand. Bah. If I can do it again, I definitely will. In the next moment, the Dragon King's aura disappeared and his raised hand fell limply to the ground. The master of the Li River disappeared from the world just like that. Zhuo Xiangzhu raised her head and looked at the sky as tears streaked across her face. She definitely didn't want to end up like that. Zhuo Yuni's body trembled as she wanted to do something to change everything. However, she also understood that no matter what she did, it would be useless. Because she was simply too weak. If she pushed the young mistress away or rushed in between the two, she would not be able to block the Li Shui Dragon King's attack or be accidentally killed by the young mistress' blood sword. No matter how she lied to herself, I'm fine with anything as long as the young mistress can live happily, it was useless. That was why she kept repeating, but over and over again. What? The piercing pain in her head made the girl subconsciously ignore this matter and try to focus on the current situation. How can I stop this tragedy from happening? How can I cut off this cycle of remorse? Don't be afraid. At this time, a warm hand gently patted her head. The girl subconsciously looked over and saw the guy who had been living in the Earth God's temple and eating and drinking for free patting her head. His dead fish eyes, which were always half open, now revealed a gentle color. I'm here. Or rather, we came here for this. After comforting the Earth God lowly, Su Xinxing turned his gaze back to the two people who were in the midst of a fierce battle. Therefore, the little girl who had the same heart as Su Xinxing turned her head, puffed up her cheeks and spat out a water column at Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing grabbed at the water column. The moment his hand touched the water column turned into ice and became something like icicles hanging under the eaves in winter. Because the holy sword is too much of a burden to this world, I can only use this. Then he dragged the icicles and tried to control his strength as he swung them toward the sky. The next moment, the clouds were directly split into two neat halves and gradually faded. The purple tribulation lightning was completely annihilated and disappeared, as if it had never existed. The sun shone on the ground and the water that had returned to tranquility sparkled. There was only one thing that was slightly different from an ordinary sunny day. That was, a huge crack appeared in the blue sky. Then he shook his head in amusement and threw this thought out of his mind. He thought to himself, I've definitely been infected by Jasmine. Probably sensing that Su Shinxing was thinking about something related to her, Jasmine, who was beside him, tilted her head and revealed a puzzled expression. What was interesting was that Jasmine had weirdly turned herself into a round ball. She probably wanted to express that she had drunk too much water. However, Su Shinxing knew that the water was not enough to moisten the little girl's throat. If she drank to her heart's content, it would not be a problem even if she drank all the liquid water on earth. At this time, Emoli had finished the food in front of him and was looking at Su Shinxing eagerly. The latter felt that he could not eat the thing that looked like seafood anyway, so he just gave it to Emoli. Thus, the little girl happily took the plate of crustaceans and began to chew on it. So, what do you plan to do in the future? After looking away from Emoli, Su Shinxing felt that the Lishui Dragon King should not be interested in discussing whether the torch dragon should be steamed or braised, and how it tasted, so he changed the topic. What plans? I will continue to maintain the order of the river as the water god, just like before. Aoli sighed. In fact, gods like the earth god, the mountain god, and the river god are similar. They will be tied to the same place by their duties until that place is merged with other places or disappears for various reasons. Finally, they will be completely hidden in history. After hearing the Dragon King's words, Su Shinxing looked at Zhuo Xiangzhu, who had not spoken since the beginning. She smiled. My position as a god has been passed to Shao Yi. After this, I plan to go to Shangjing. This answer was not out of Su Shinxing's expectations. He nodded slightly and made a look of understanding. What? Xiangzhu, are you going to Shangjing? On the other hand, the Dragon King's face turned pale with fright. He obviously did not expect such an answer. Isn't this obvious? Even Xiao Jingyi, who had lost her appetite after digging out the mysterious sticky substance from the crustacean's body and had stopped eating like Su Shinxing, had an indifferent look on her face. There's no need to be so surprised, okay? What? Young mistress is going to Shangjing. The earth god lowly widened her eyes and said in disbelief. Hey, even you are coming. Xiao Jingyi's face immediately turned awkward. Su Shinxing could understand why the Dragon King was so surprised. After all, this guy was an honest dragon with a tough life. Until just now, he was probably still thinking that even if they could not become lovers, at least he could look at her from afar. Even if his rationality told him that Zhuo Xiangzhu would most likely follow in her lover's footsteps and leave this place, he would still hold on to some hope and not think about what was more likely to happen. If that story was true, then Zhuo Xiangzhu gave up his 1,000 years of hard work and went to Shangjing alone. He was afraid that the only thing he got was the bad news that the scholar had a new lover. In this case, if we want to reverse the bad ending, do we also have to go to Shangjing? Xiao Jingyi, who originally thought that everything was fine, could not help but frown and ask. It's hard to say. After all, if this is a dream, the main character is still in Shangjing. I don't think that leaving the main character aside will solve the problem. Su Shinxing shook his head. Perhaps this action made Emoli a little itchy, so the little girl hit Su Shinxing's chin hard with her head. Only a dong sound was heard. Nothing happened to Su Shinxing, but Emoli covered his head and trembled on the table with a painful look on his face. When the three of them gathered together, it was naturally impossible not to attract the attention of others. In addition, the movement just now was too big. Even the Lishui Dragon King, who had this king, is very sad. No one needs to care about this king look from the beginning, could not help but cast a sidelong glance. That could it be that the dishes of the Dragon Palace are not to your taste? He asked Su Shinxing with some apprehension. It's nothing, it's all right. Su Shinxing replied with a dry laugh. Although there were indeed some dishes that gave people a strange feeling, in fact most of the dishes were quite normal and the taste was also very good. That's good. This king specially instructed the chef to prepare carefully this time. Although it was sudden and some rare ingredients could not be obtained in a short period of time, the ingredients that were brought up now are also very precious. For example, this pot of kelp soup. This black lump of kelp soup really is kelp soup. Whose family's kelp looks like this? Speaking of which, it even wriggled a little just now. This thing is not cooked at all. Or rather, why can the kelp wriggle like a leech? Su Shinxing immediately ridiculed in his heart. It's made from kelp that is full of spiritual energy near Penglai Immortal Mountain. Because the immortals who grow kelp only do it occasionally when they're not cultivating, the output has always been small. The Lishui Dragon King eagerly recommended the pot of strange-looking kelp soup. and it's said that it has the function of growing hair, nourishing hair, and is favored by many cultivators who stay up late to cultivate. Really, breast implants? I'm not at the age where I have to worry about my hair, haha, Su Shenxing said with a fake smile. I feel that the way you address this king is a bit strange. Is this king's misconception? The Lishui Dragon King scratched his head. It's your misconception, breast implants, Su Shenxing said resolutely. Then he sat upright, picked up the bowl of mysterious black substance and drank it in one gulp. Xiao Jingyi at the side seemed like he wanted to say something, but considering his own safety he wisely chose to keep quiet in the end. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, the banquet was nearing its end. Brother, no matter what, my Lishui clan is indebted to your help this time, the Lishui Dragon King said with a bitter smile. It seemed like he remembered the disheartened feeling he had when he planned to commit suicide by borrowing the hands of Zhuo Xiangzhu. This king doesn't have anything too good as a reward. Just tell me what you want. Su Shenxing was a bit hesitant. Should he ask for 50 to 60 pounds of kelp from the other party? But what if this was just a dream and he couldn't bring it back? I want that. Emoli didn't hesitate to point with his chubby little finger. Su Shenxing looked in the direction he pointed, but what he saw was the Lishui Dragon King's stunned face. This made Su Shenxing a bit embarrassed, thinking, could it be that Emoli wants this dragon's head? That's a bit tricky. I'm currently in the good faction. Perhaps he felt that Su Shenxing was thinking about how to kill and set fire, so Xiao Jingyi, who was in the good faction, coughed dryly. Old Su, I think Emoli might be talking about the jewel on the breast implant crown. Hearing him say this, Su Shenxing realized that there was indeed a very beautiful jewel on the Lishui Dragon King's crown. Oh, this one. Aoli seemed to be relieved. He took off his crown and threw the jewel to the little girl. I took this from my father's palace. Other than being beautiful, it doesn't have any other use. If you like it, I'll give it to you. Emoli raised the jewel with an expressionless face. Tenoshi. This made Su Shenxing behind him reveal a slight smile. Since he had accepted the other party's gift, it seemed that this time he had to bring the other party a happy ending. But from the point that this guy was already end tier, a happy ending would do, right? Chapter 383. After the flood incident, Su Shenxing and the others returned to the Temple of the Earth. Although the Lishui Dragon King said that it was fine even if they stayed in the Dragon Palace, Su Shenxing reluctantly refused in consideration of the purpose of their trip. Of course, whether it was the warm and hospitable Dragon King or the kelp soup that he was reluctant to part with was unknown. After bidding farewell to Zhuo Xiangzhu on the official road from Jiangjin to Shangjing, Su Shenxing returned to his idle state. I say, is this really okay? Xiao Jingyi paced back and forth in the living room of the Temple of the Earth. When Su Shenxing was about to get dizzy, he asked with an uneasy expression, if we don't go to Shangjing with the former Earth God, if something happens over there, we won't be able to do anything from here. If you're so worried, you can go to Shangjing yourself. As for the travel expenses, you can just ask breast implants for reimbursement. I think he'll be very happy. Su Shenxing was focused on the work at hand and answered absent-mindedly. Then what if I accidentally mess things up? Xiao Jingyi seemed to be a little tempted. After all, not everyone had the opportunity to see the ancient capital of the Celestial Empire, but immediately asked anxiously. Kill yourself to atone for your sins. Hey, the punishment is so heavy. Xiao Jingyi immediately gave up and sat down on the armchair. He looked at the things in Su Shenxing's hands and asked curiously, by the way, what have you been doing since just now? Didn't Emoli ask for a gem from breast implants before? This girl didn't have a place to put it, so I simply asked breast implants for some silver. I'm preparing to make a necklace purely by hand. Su Shenxing took the time to give Xiao Jingyi a thumbs up. I'm a friend who's good at handwork. Is there something wrong with my view of the world? Why do I feel like there's a difference between handmade crafting and your actions, which are like playing with clay? Xiao Jingyi complained with an embarrassed expression. That's true. Su Shenxing threw the half-finished product on the table with a pained expression. Damn, it's too difficult to make every link of the chain exactly the same. So, the level of your behavior is no different from hand-knitting instant noodles. Xiao Jingyi picked up the half-finished product and found that the half-finished silver necklace was actually not much different from the modern mass-produced ones. He couldn't help but be amazed and feel that Su Shenxing was really too boring. Of course, Mo Li, who was eating watermelon while watching Su Shenxing cook, was even more bored. Aren't instant noodles handmade? Su Shenxing was shocked. Cough, I saw that the atmosphere was too boring, so I was just joking. Don't look at me with that. This alien really exposed a flaw expression. Su Shenxing coughed and explained awkwardly. And don't look at me with pity. While the two big men were idly performing crosstalk in the living room, a small bell in the corner of the living room suddenly rang. Su Shenxing and Xiao Jingyi couldn't help but look at each other. After living here for so many days, they naturally knew that this thing was the secret signal used by the former Earth God to meet her lover. But the problem was, whether it was the former Earth God girl or her lover, shouldn't they both be in Shangjing at this time? Without waiting for them to take any action, the Earth God Loli, who had been depressed since Xue Xiangzhu left, stumbled out of the inner room with an excited expression on her face. It must be the eldest miss. I knew that the eldest miss wouldn't really leave me alone. Su Shenxing and Xiao Jingyi looked at each other. What do you think? Xiao Jingyi asked in a low voice. I'm afraid that the person who came is not the former Earth God. Su Shenxing frowned and guessed. The former Earth God should be the type who was very opinionated and stood by her words. Since she decided to go to Shangjing alone, it was impossible for her to give up halfway and suddenly run back. No matter what, since the plot had happened, Su Shenxing and Xiao Jingyi naturally couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Thus, the two of them along with Mo Li followed her out. The crack in the sky was still there, which made the sky look a bit magical. Although this scene attracted the attention of the world at first, humans' ability to adapt was very strong. After the crack had been hanging in the sky for a long time without anything happening, most people's curiosity had passed and they began to get used to it. Their attention naturally shifted to other places. For example, occasionally seeing a lunar eclipse would be very impressive, but if a lunar eclipse happened every day 365 days in a year, people would treat it as a normal phenomenon and wouldn't pay attention to it. Why is it you? From afar, Su Shenxing could hear the desperate cries of the Earth God Loli coming from the Earth God Temple. After they entered the Earth God Temple, the situation inside was as expected. The person who rang the bell was the scholar. Greetings, Miss Uni. Is Miss Xiangzhu here? The scholar didn't feel uncomfortable with the Earth God Loli's disgust and only smiled faintly as he asked her. Miss Uni isn't at home and won't appear for a long time. You should give up. The Earth God Loli ruthlessly refused without hesitation. The scholar seemed to have gotten used to the other party's harsh words and only revealed a bitter smile. Don't make trouble. This time I came to find Miss Xiangzhu for a proper matter. What matter? Just tell her directly. The Earth God Loli still didn't give him any face. The scholar seemed to want to say something, but at this moment, someone who was dressed as an aide ran in and said in the scholar's ear, Sir, the prefectural magistrate and the rest have all arrived. If you don't go, I'm afraid it will be rude. Once you become enemies with these local officials, the mission that the emperor gave us will be somewhat troublesome. At this moment, Su Shenxing realized that the scholar was wearing an official's robe. Furthermore, although Su Shenxing wasn't sure how official's robe was categorized, he felt that the scholar's rank wasn't low. It seemed that this fellow had some tricks up his sleeve. Not long after arriving in Tianjing, he became a high-ranking official and returned home in glory. In that case, could it be that he had coincidentally missed the previous Earth God Loli? Perhaps he felt that he wouldn't be able to see Xue Xiangzhu if he continued to stay here today. Thus, the scholar cupped his fists towards Su Shenxing with some regret. If there's a chance, please tell Xiangzhu that I've returned. Thank you very much. After saying that, he planned to leave. Wait a moment. At this moment, the Earth God Loli suddenly called out to him. Why did you return to Jiangjin this time? From the girl's conflicted expression, Su Shenxing could feel that the girl's heart was in a dilemma. If this scholar said that he had specially returned to pick up Xue Xiangzhu, the Earth God Loli would probably tell him about Xue Xiangzhu's whereabouts. Sir, you've received an imperial edict to return to do a great deed that will benefit the country and the people. Before the scholar could speak, the aide beside him replied somewhat arrogantly, Actually, it's not a big deal. The scholar only smiled before continuing to explain. I just want to dig up the Li River and change its course. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.